Hey, everybody. Welcome to Hash Church 2.0. Episode, I don't know, 8 maybe. I kind of lost track, I have to admit. Once we took some long breaks, I was just like, whatever. The number is the number. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this morning. Very stoked to see a good group of the regular chatters in the chat room. I still, to this day, after several hundred episodes of Hash Church, get a little bit of butterflies in my stomach. That's how much it means to me to do an episode of Hash Church each day. It's exciting. I always want it to be good. I never want it to be bad. And there's a responsibility in it, So I guess without further ado, I will send out the links to our group. I do have quite a few people this Sunday afternoon or morning. It's going to be 14 plus of us that get the invitation, so only a fraction of us are going to be able to come into the room. That being said, there we go. Send that. That being said, I'm sure we can rotate, and I'm sure if some people want to come in and they don't get a chance, other people can leave the room for a little bit here and there. And I have sent the rooms. Oh, what's going on here? Did that not go through? That's weird. Huh. I might have to do this again. Bear with me. I've had a little bit of a technical difficulty. Let's see what's going on here. Let me just make sure I've done this correctly so we can get everyone in here. The old Hash Church intensities. Yeah, this isn't going to work, so I got to do this again. Let's see. It's Sabo, Sarah, John, Wendy, Darren, Mark, Angel. I think I can remember that. Bear with me, everyone. Just want to get these invitations sent out. I did send the email out, and that worked fine, but for whatever reason, it's saying there's no participants in this other one. So let's see. It was Sarah Sunday. It was Sabo. It was Angel Vasquez. It was Mark Scialdone. Darren Massey. I'm sure I'm forgetting some. Let me see if I can find the no participants one. Wendy. Don't want to forget Wendy. Don't want to forget Joao. You know what? I'm just going to send it right here. Let's see if that doesn't work. Because that was everyone that said they wanted to be in it. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult when you set up the chat, when you set up the private message in Facebook to send out these chats. If I get a message, it can mess things up for me, but hopefully, hopefully that works. Anyway, in the meantime, while I'm waiting for everyone to come into the room, because I'm all alone here on Hash Church, we got 254 viewers in the room. I just got back from Amsterdam. For those of you that were paying any attention, I was in Amsterdam, in Leiden, actually, Holland, for the International Cannabinoid Research Society. And that was very cool. Very excited to be in that. I'll talk a little bit about it once we get some folks in the room. Kind of funny to have this happen where it's just, I've never had it happen. It's saying there's no participants in the room, but well, we'll see what happens. Let's see if anyone's going to get in here today. Weird that this isn't working. Yeah, it's not letting me send a single message. Oh, Johnny Beerfellow. There's another one I forgot. Hey, what's going on, guys? We got some people coming in now. There we go. We got some folks. Who's the loud guy? Oh, that's Mark coming in loud. So who do we got? We got Farmer Tom. We got Joao. We got Mark Scialdone, Dr. Mark Scialdone. We got Johnny B. And we got Sabo. Farmer John's just working it out here. He's under his umbrella there. Excellent. All right. Geez, I felt like I was all alone there for a while, guys. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
I'm going to mute Farmer John for a second while he's fixing his camera there. Coming in a bit hot. Oh, I could have worn headphones, actually. I didn't even think. It's not even letting me mute you. But if you guys aren't talking, definitely mute your own microphones. It makes it a lot easier and better because there's noise. Sabo! Where you at, Sabo?
Just setting up my camera.
Setting up the camera. Wade's in the house. Wade's in the house. The house of laughter. The house of smiles. Well, I'm going to... Johnny B, please mute your mic, brother. Please, when you're moving everything around like that. I got you muted, actually. It worked for me. All right. Cool. Everyone. Well, not quite everyone, but the first 4 or 5 people that I've invited.
What do you want? I don't want to go on inside. What do you want?
All right, let me see if I can. For whatever reason, it's not letting me mute Farmer Tom. So if you're playing around with your microphone and you're moving things around, just mute your own. There you go. Perfect. Perfect. Telephones tend to be the loudest. iPads tend to be the loudest because your microphone's literally right on your camera there. So I do welcome you all into the room. I will kind of give some introductions to some new faces here in a bit. I just want to make sure that everyone, you obviously got the link, Mark, from Facebook.
Yeah, just unmuting myself. Yeah, good morning, Mark. How you doing?
Very good, very good.
Facebook. How does my mic sound, okay?
Your mic sounds wonderful.
Oh, great. Great to hear you, and great to see this panel assembled today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very happy to see you all. It was kind of a spur of the moment last night. Every Sunday, every Saturday night, Sundays come around, and I always want to do Hash Church. It's just a matter of, do we have a good group of people to meet up and have a good dialogue? Today's dialogue is really kind of an open dialogue. There's no particular topic, but I have invited a very sort of well-rounded group of individuals. Just to go through the group real quick, I've got Eric, who's come in from Pure Pressure, who I've gotten to know quite a bit over the last year after using their Long Peaks unit and doing a couple of shows with them. We got Farmer Tom, who came in a while ago for one of our, was it our greenhouse show that you were on, Farmer Tom? I'm not even remembering which episode it was that you came and joined us for.
Yes, sir. It was the greenhouse show.
Excellent, excellent. So we got Farmer Tom in the house. We got Wade, of course, from the Caldrius Network, and I think Forrest is going to be popping in a little bit later on. Hope your back's doing better, Wade. I hope you're feeling better. We also have Joao, who is a new friend of mine. I met him recently. He reached out to me. He's from Brazil, and Joao is really the sort of the person behind Ganja Talks and the Bubble Man solventless extraction course that we're going to be doing here in the next little bit. We kind of started it with a 4-part series of free courses, and I've just been super stoked with the professionalism that he's displayed so far with his team, and I thought it would be kind of a cool idea to bring him in and have a little bit of a talk about that as well. We got Johnny B, who needs no introduction. Johnny B. He's in the room. Good old Johnny B. We also have Sarah Sunday, who just popped in. Sarah, someone actually, here on Google Chat. And Sarah, of course, runs the Karma Cup, which, what has it been, 4 or 5 years now, Sarah? Are we on 4? 5? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? I don't think Sarah can hear me, but she's working on it. Anyway, we'll be talking a little bit about the upcoming Karma Cup in September. And then, of course, my good friend Sabo is also in the room, creator of the Vape Exhale, this little unit. How sweet are these little units here? So I'm sure Sabo's always got great things going on. I love all the things that he's doing. One of the most important things that I wanted to discuss with him today was sort of the cannabis parenting, a cannabis entrepreneur parenting young children in this day and age, and sort of just get an open discussion going on somewhat of the difficulties of that, but also the obstacles that we need to overcome because, parenting is a whole different trip. It's not really just all about what you yourself are into and what you like, but you also have this responsibility to your children to make sure that you don't put them in a situation that causes them embarrassment or creates obstacles for them. So I thought we would have a little conversation about that as well. And I guess I've pretty much introduced everyone so far. Dr. Mark Scialdone needs no introduction. He was crushing it on the last few hash churches. It was kind of like Dr. Mark Church, we could have called it after the last science one, where he went and just dropped the power knowledge ball on his hydrogenation process and some other interesting things. So
Thanks, Mark.
welcome everybody. Welcome everybody. Very happy to have you all here. Not really sure who to open it up with, how to talk about. I guess I'll talk a little bit about the ICRS, which Mark, you should absolutely go to in the next one. That is an event. I think it might be an event designed for you with all your peers. You know, it was a little bit over my head, I won't lie. The first day was incredible. Welcome Skunkman Sam into the room. Sam I Am. I don't know if any of you saw the picture of me with Sam I Am on my lap there about a week ago when I was at his house. There's Sam doing his thing, sitting all happy with his little boa. Hey, what's going on, guys? Smoke hash. So yeah, it was Sam, of course, and Chimera who really inspired me. Chimera more than anyone to head out to the ICRS this year. It was my first one that I've ever been to. And Sam kind of warned me. He said, you know, the first day or two will be really good and very cannabis and plant related, and then it'll go deep into the endocannabinoid study. And as it did, it totally got super deep, turned into some hardcore, you know, science where they're testing on lab rats and mice and monkeys and stuff. And both myself and Ian, who I was with from Seger International, were having a borderline difficult time with that aspect of it. I'm sure many of you remember some of the first times Dr. Natasha came in and started talking a little bit about the mice studies. From a cannabis person's perspective, it's somewhat shocking because generally most of us aren't sitting around torturing mice into figuring out how cannabinoid receptors work. But this is happening out in the world, and of course these people join annually at the International Cannabinoid Research Society. An exceptional group of people, I do have to admit. There were some wonderful people there that I got to hang out with, and I will probably make an attempt to make it there next year, depending on where it is, unless it's in America, in which case I'll have to maybe just read the footnotes. Nothing against my American brethren and sistren. Just terrified of your government is all.
Aren't we all?
So are we.
Yes, so are we.
So are we. Not to start with politics this early in the morning. We can finish it right at that. But yeah, wonderful group of people at the ICRS. Mark, you should definitely 100% make an attempt on heading out there.
Yeah, I totally need to go. I've been told for many years I need to go. And Chimera tried to sink me in this year, and why? Oh, I know why. It was my wife's birthday, and we went and saw Trey in Central Park.
I saw that. That was wonderful.
That was fun.
It looked absolutely spectacular. I guess you posted a picture of asking, what was it, 22 or 23 years ago, you asked her to marry you?
Yeah. Oh, that happened in Soldier Field, actually. Yeah, before Jerry Garcia died in 1995. I asked my wife to marry me, not knowing that just, a little over a month later, Jerry would be gone and our lives would take a different direction from that point forward, but forever impacted on the fact that I lived during the time of Jerry Garcia in my lifetime was just amazing that I got to see so many of his concerts, and it had such a profound effect. Marcus, I don't know if you know, but I used to play in a Grateful Dead cover band, and that's how I met my wife. And so I remind children all the time, if it wasn't for Jerry Garcia, you guys wouldn't be here. So
True.
Use that as a lead into your parenting thing.
I think it is. I think it's a perfect lead. And it's not really my parenting thing. It's a conversation Sable started on his podcast, and it was one that I was going to be a part of, but it kind of got canceled out. And so I don't know. Do you want to have a good discussion about cannabis entrepreneurs, cannabis growers, and cannabis parenting? What do you say, Sabo? How's it been going with you? Oh, you're on mute there. Got to unmute your mic there, and then we'll get you happening.
All right. Sorry about that, guys. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't causing feedback, but I didn't know how to unmute my own microphone. So things are going really well out here in California. Obviously, well, I don't want to say really well. There's a bunch of compliance issues and things that everyone is taking care of, that various levels of headaches depending on where you are in the supply chain. But at least for me, with the Canna parenting and the Canna dads, that's been going along really well. It seems that, 18 months ago when we first started it, it was met with a lot more resistance. A lot of people were very surprised that I would be open about talking about my cannabis use while, at a PTA meeting. And over the last year and a half, things have definitely changed. Many of the other parents have become proponents of the cannabis movement here in California. So it's not just, me telling a bunch of people, but it's a group of people telling other parents. And the fact is, I live in the Silicon Valley, and a lot of the parents here are cannabis users. So we are all kind of coming together and figuring out, how do we talk to our children about, the shift in the state, where it was, medical last year and now it's adult use. And then also just to, help the other parents who maybe have not consumed since their college days, understand how to put on the training wheels and get accustomed to cannabis again. And we've actually been seeing quite a few parents, switch from, having a beer or a glass of wine, after work to now, maybe getting a vape pen and taking a couple puffs of CBD. So, I've seen a lot of change over the last 18 months, and it's been really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing. It's definitely a conversation for the times. I know that when I first had my children 17 plus years ago, it was not a conversation that I was personally willing to have. It was more like this closet thing, hiding it in the closet, much like what Cuban just said right now in the chat room. He's like, wow, I would never share that with the school system or parents. It goes to show you that there's this vibe of fear, and that's really the thing that needs to be sort of deconstructed and removed. We shouldn't be afraid to have this conversation. I know that we've all come from this sort of gray, not all of us, but a lot of us have come from this gray area situation where, fighting for cannabis today is much different than fighting for cannabis 20 plus years ago, where they sort of had this no zero tolerance thing going on where they just, arrest you and throw away the key type of thing. Lots of people did lots of time for cannabis over the years. But I think we owe it to ourselves and to our communities to sort of be that strong voice that says, look, I know I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm not breaking any laws. A lot of us now have medical licenses and are protected in that sense, that we need to be able to have this conversation, particularly about and with our children in regards to cannabis use. And welcome to Forrest, who just came in, who has, of course, a very unique background in the sense of, not having any fear whatsoever about having this discussion, because, his foundation is it's even more harsh than a lot of us who are just trying to protect our healthy children. Forrest, of course, has a very sick child who's been suffering for many years, and cannabis is a huge alleviation to that. And any parent who's going to be put in a situation where they're going to be in trouble from the police, or they're going to keep their child from potentially perishing, it makes it a very easy decision, which is, I'm going to fight for my child's rights to be able to be as healthy as possible and to improve the quality of their lives before I'm going to be worried. I mean, you know what it boils down to? Fear and scarcity and love and abundance, and what side of the coin you want to fall on for the choices that you make and the direction that your life is going on. Fear and scarcity is something that sucks a lot of us into often. And it's very easy to be like, oh, I don't want to talk about that. I just want to stay under the radar. And then there's that love and abundance vibe, which is like, you know what? People need to hear about this. We need to have this discussion. And the bottom line is that a lot of people do use cannabis, and a lot of people, I mean, imagine we live in a day and age where you'd want to be afraid of your cannabis use, whereas you could be a proud abuser of alcohol and almost have never any negative consequences. It just seems like somewhat of a social tear a tear on the social fabric of our very communities. So I, for one, am excited to get a little bit into this conversation. Perhaps, Forrest, you want to give us a little bit of an update with what's going on with you and Silas, and tell us about parenting and cannabis use.
Well, good morning, everybody. Sure, it's good to see you all. Wow, that's a big question. Let's just hit it right off the bat, huh? Get going. I mean, again, like you said, for those who don't know, I have a child who has a rare seizure disorder called Lennox-Gastaut syndrome. It's one of the two approved seizure conditions for the Epidiolex drug that's getting a whole bunch of attention, the first FDA cannabinoid-based approved medication, because the conditions are so serious, essentially. I mean, these kids have intractable, catastrophic forms of epilepsy. They don't respond to other types of medications. Now we know because those medications don't interact and adjust the right receptor systems in the body to correct the problems, unlike cannabis. From the very beginning, we've had to fight this stigma, with children and cannabis and use. And we've been kind of on the front lines of that battle for, 10 years, because we've really had to help shift the cultural understanding of cannabis. And a lot of that has to do with addressing just what you were talking about, the fears and stigmas that are surrounding cannabis, and having to really address them one by one based on their merit. And, what we found is that when we started doing research, because now we're getting into wanting to give our own child cannabis, which is a lot different than me wanting to use it. It's a real different decision giving it to your kids. And getting people to approve allowing us to do that, we had to look at all the science and research surrounding cannabis, surrounding its perceived harm, everything from IQ and cognitive development to stunting brain growth to neonatal use in cannabis. And what I found going into it, really wanting to know what the risks are with my own child, was that you really start to see how biased and poor a lot of the science is that sets out to demonstrate harm. And really found that there was very little evidence to support a lot of the stigmas and fears that come around or that are applied to cannabis. We all know that when you use cannabis and you use it frequently, and people who use cannabis medicinally, their brains work a little different after a while. It changes the way receptors work. The greatest studies, the most respected studies show, that cannabis can impact the way you think, for up to 2 weeks. If with heavy use, the effects might last up to 2 weeks afterwards. And what they've demonstrated is maybe a 1 or 2 point decrease in IQ, which, if we can get into the question of IQ, if those tests are valid. But what they've shown is that, the maximum amount of harm they could demonstrate was that, people will have an affected way of thinking for maybe 2 weeks. Of course, that affected way of thinking and changing the way the brain works is exactly where a lot of the benefit comes from. And the what we didn't understand with effects of memory and short-term memory are now a lot of the things that we're finding are what applies to correcting issues like PTSD with endocannabinoid deficiency disorders and other issues. So once we embraced that there was really zero long-term or permanent harm demonstrated with cannabis, we were able to start really discussing that on a more scientific level, working with kids. So, we work with kids full time. We have children who are on doses of 2,500 milligrams a day and show zero long-term effects. Their bodies adjust. It corrects the issues that are not functioning well in the body. And we've actually seen the exact opposite of what is proposed to have happened. The theory is that if kids are using cannabis, then they're not going to develop cognitively, that they're going to see decreases in IQ. It's going to stunt their brain development. And what we're seeing across the board is the exact opposite. We see when the body starts to be able to regulate electrical signaling and neurotransmitter function correctly, the brain functions in a more healthy manner. We see increases in IQ. We see increases in cognition. We see kids often, and it sounds like nonsense until you're actually working with these populations, but you see children who couldn't speak prior to using cannabis. And, it might sound like
oral dose. Are you giving that by oral?
Yeah. With kids, everything's oral and suspensions and measured dosing. Typically 3 or 4 times a day. Our goals being to keep sustained levels in the body, as a supplement to try to correct or mitigate issues based on endocannabinoid deficiencies. So yeah, oral suspensions, measured doses, and those high doses. Well, they used to be rare, but now with some of the Epidiolex trials, the kids coming to us with recommended from their doctors, not just random doctors off the street, like the head of neurology at Stanford and UCSF, large clinics that have worked with this drug are now recommending starting doses for kids, primarily focused on CBD because that's all they can work with now, but starting at 10, 15 milligrams per pound body weight, and quickly having them recommend even higher, up to 25 milligrams per pound. We had a kid come to us the other day. So we get kids who are coming with doctor's notes saying, hey, my child's 9, he weighs 100 pounds. Can you guys help us sustain a 2,500 milligram a day dose, right? So we see that more and more. And I think that's going to be a bubble that bursts a little bit. Some of those large doses, some of that is because the medical establishment is only working with CBD. And when you start integrating other cannabinoids.
Sorry to interrupt, but at 2,500 milligrams a day, I mean, does that make it cost ineffective? I mean, just cost per milligram wise, I was doing the math in my head, and it seems like, I give my kids significantly less. They have less severe issues, but I was just curious. How do people make that work economically?
They don't. That's a great question. They don't. With some of the work, and maybe we'll get into it a little later, that we're doing with legislation here in California, I've recently gone to a bunch of dispensaries just to get what is available and what does that play out to in the real world if parents are trying to meet the recommended doses that doctors are asking. And just recently, we were looking for the only full plant medicine that we could find that had all the necessary requirements, right? Proper testing results, proper labeling for dosage, the right credibility to use on young kids. It was about 300 milligrams and it was $80, So you're looking at, in reality, if people treating rare disease and trying to follow the recommendations of these doctors, they're needing to spend, one, the kids will have to drink 5 to 8 of those bottles a day just to reach the sustained dose. And then you have the cost of, anywhere between $800 and $1,200 a day to make that dose. And some people will point to like, well, there's these other products on the market that are 1,500 milligram tinctures, but we're seeing very few full spectrum plant products being put out at those doses. We see a lot of isolate products. The quality seems to go down with some of these products as the dosage level goes up, and the efficacy goes down with them too. So if they're not, if they don't carry the medical efficacy necessary to where we're not seeing the results, then we have to go down to the full plant, which are lower doses, and it becomes, it's not doable. So that's one of the
real differences in efficacy between whole plant and specifically metered distillate-based products that are sort of
very much so, Mark.
Because that would be, again, I'm trying to understand the nature of all the other ingredients that are in there other than the cannabinoids that are adding to efficacy. So those are everything else that's being extracted.
Yeah. So this is where we get into the unknown, right? But from my experience, I'm a full believer, just from anecdotal evidence. I am 100% a believer of the entourage effect. I think obviously we're still learning some of the interactions and modifications that terpenes do to cannabinoids, but I've seen it firsthand where we have kids on, say, like a strain like AC/DC is a good universal type 3 low THC strain that we use, high CBD. But at times we run out. It doesn't grow well in our area, so it's hard to keep the numbers. And we have everything's a fight. So, but I cannabinoid profile, exact same doses, different strain. And I think the strain was Electra, the last one that we had a really bad reaction. And we've seen kids go from seizure control to in the hospital with the changes in strain. So again, yeah, that leads to that terpene profile, what is available. That's another problem right now with some of the commercial marketplace. You're just shopping based on CBD and THC, but rarely can, in some stores, but it's just harder to find sustainable single strain, full plant, because it does make a difference. And yeah, we've just seen, I've seen, some of the it's kind of like the more we purify CBD, the less effective it is. And I think that works what the science shows with almost every cannabinoid. So, you see moderate, or you might see some benefit, but when you're dealing with kids who are in hospice or having, 2,500, 3,000 seizures a month, then, dropping it by 10% is good. And if that CBD isolate is safe and clean and you drop it by 10%, well, that's a benefit. But that's where people, I think, confuse the potential that is in cannabis with just some efficacy. They start trying a product, they see a little bit of benefit, and they stick with it. Whereas when you're able to really start to dial in the cannabinoid profile that best meets the malfunctioning need of that unique brain. So all sorts of different things can go wrong that cause the ECS to not function properly. When you start to really dial in what works for that brain, then you start seeing efficacy into the 50%, 60%, up to 80 and 90% percentile. So it's not as simple as black and white when people talk about these things. And that's, I think that causes some confusion online where they say, well, I've tried this product and it did good for me. And what I really try to get people to think about, well, okay, what does good for you look like? What was your baseline? What percentage of increase and benefit did you get? And are you satisfied there? Is there better potential out there with a higher quality product, or continuing to work with different profiles that you might respond better as an individual?
Yeah, I wanted to go back real quick about in regards to what they say is going to happen to the brain when you use cannabis as a youth or whatnot. Some of the tests that they use to acquire these results, because they're not testing humans per se. And after going to the ICRS and listening to a lot of these different sort of tests and scientific experiments they put forward, the ones that were sponsored by NIDA, the National Institute of Drug Abuse, were very negative. And we, my friend and I, Ian, had a hard time sitting through them and watching them torture these rats, blowing like the equivalent of multiple kilos in vapor into these cages where the rats are just getting inundated. They're trying to, this test in particular was on how the offspring of animals are affected by cannabis use, but they used the most extreme level, and not oral, but vapor, blowing vapor into these rats' faces, and then coming out with these results that said, the children were unable to walk, the offspring were unable to walk properly, and have all these sort of negative connotations. And I was sitting in the audience thinking, I wonder if the torture of the parents in a gas chamber had anything to do with the outcome of how these small offspring react. And it's laughable, Forrest. You are correct. Yeah. But it's insane that that's kind of how some of this information is collected for people to use in arguments against, or the use of cannabis in developing minds. I mean, once again, it's pretty hard to argue with the fact someone's having 2,000 to 3,000 seizures a month, and then suddenly you hit the right cannabinoid profile and you bring that down 90%. That's astronomical.
Yeah, and that, I think you hit the nail on the head. That's what we see mostly when you look at these studies. I tend to see two problems that jump out first, and Mark might have some insight into that as well. But they have they either use dosages that are just not real world applicable, right? They give the equivalent of hundreds of pounds of use, into some of these animals, or they don't account for comorbidity. So in the human trials, they, especially if we're talking about neonatal use and pregnancy, they don't account for alcohol or tobacco use in a lot of those studies. So those are things, hey man, welcome. Those are things that are people have to take into account. So it makes it hard. So it makes our fight back to working with children primarily and trying to educate the public. It makes it much more difficult because it's hard to teach people to read past the headlines, let alone read past the abstract on a study, right? Because even the abstracts can be slanted towards where the funding came from, but when you get into the study itself, you really see the full picture of the study. So, for example, one of them that I mentioned, saying that cannabis can lower the IQ, heavy cannabis use or THC use can lower the IQ. So that's the title says that, the abstract says that, but you get into reading the study and they show that the doses were extremely high. And the worst case scenario they could find was that the effects lasted for 10 to 14 days and that there were no permanent effects. That to me shows that, if you're using heavy amounts of THC, your brain's going to start to function a little differently. That doesn't demonstrate harm. But if you just read the title and just read the abstract, they say, okay, I've got something to support my argument. So it makes it really challenging. But the reality is that all we have to do is look at what medications are typically prescribed for an ailment and compare them to the side effects of cannabis and what's been demonstrated. And even if we accept some side effects that really I think can be questioned at this point, but if we give them the benefit of doubt and accept some side effects, we're going to see that it is still the safest and best treatment option, not just for efficacy, but for potential long-term harm. I would take a 2% or a 2-point IQ decrease in my son, for example, who already has developmental delays, is going to live and need caring for his whole life. If you can tell me the difference between a 72 IQ and a 70 IQ versus living and dead, then maybe you can argue that this isn't a safe treatment option. But when we look at the other medications that are provided for a lot of these kids, and there's some people here who popped in who might be able to talk about this, and you look at the side effects and you live with those side effects from damage to internal intestines, liver damage, behavioral and mood changes, weight gain, the list, Steven Johnson syndrome, the list of effects that come with a lot of these medications are documented and real. So even if we say, it seems like the bar for cannabis has been set as it either has to be harmless or it's going to kill you, right? But that's not the case. Even if we look at the side effects, we start to understand them. If we compare those to what our other treatment options are, and then compare those to the efficacy that they provide, you have to really see pretty deep in ideology to not when treating these kids or yourself or any adult.
Awesome. I would like to give hi everyone. I'm a patient. I have epilepsy, so I would like to talk a little bit about myself, about this issue. I think makes totally sense. So I have epilepsy since I'm 16 years old. I was against cannabis for a long period of my life. I'm from Brazil. So here is really strict, really dangerous, let's say this way, to relate with cannabis because of the cartel and all those things. So I realized that cannabis was good for me when I was, it was 5 years ago. I was living in a bedroom with no soundproof and light-proof. And I had my life was completely just about taking really hard medicine and just having a totally different life. And when I start to consume cannabis every day, my life changed totally. How my life was I could have a normal life, go out with my friends, do all those things that I couldn't do for so long. And I come from a really conservative family. In Brazil, this is really religious side is really huge. And one thing related to parental thing as well is my family, when they saw the results of using cannabis every day, they saw that I got really, really better soon of using. So they changed all their mentality because they could see it. They could see that I was getting better every day. So my experience that I would like to share with you guys is when a father and a mother see that you get better, doesn't matter which is the medicine, you see the results. In epilepsy, as I have since I'm a kid, it's a really like a strong illness, you know. You need to like, it's unbelievable that like in Brazil, even in some countries in Latin America, we still have this policy against cannabis, even like seeing the great results that. Sorry to share that, because I'm a patient. I think it's good to share the experience that I have with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Joao, for sharing. And welcome to Wendy and Coltyn Turner, who have just come into the room at a perfect time as we're discussing sort of, you know, parenting and cannabis use, not only in the situation that the conversation turned to, which was actually giving your children cannabis, but also under the conversation or the dialogue of being a parent who uses cannabis maybe medicinally or recreationally for yourself, and having children and the sort of obstacles that are needed to be overcome throughout the, you know, how do you discuss that with your children? Do you hide it from the schools and from the parents and the friends? Or is it something that we're at a time now where we can open this dialogue and be a little bit more open about it? But really welcome to both of you. It's great to see you. And I hear you guys made a pretty big move recently.
Yep, for the first time in 4 years, because of the laws in the state of Illinois, and because I'm able to get the medicine that I use here, I've been finally able to move from Colorado back to my home state of Southern Illinois. And that is, it's fantastic, but the reality is that there's still a lot of patients who are also stuck in states, you know, like Colorado, that can't move back home because they don't have access. Or, you know, patients that can't move to Colorado in the first place simply because, you know, they don't have, you know, the kind of money or anything to make that kind of move. It's a really big decision.
And parents are still getting prosecuted for giving their kids silly little things like THC, or I say silly little things like THC because I don't think it's a big deal. But silly little things like CBD, you know, CBD is, I mean, come on, people. It's nothing. I mean, it helps with no kind of crazy side effects at all. And I think that people just really need to start waking up. And I think they have. I think people are getting it. I think law enforcement is really the issue, that they don't want to let go of what they have invested in the war on drugs. But I think that parents have kind of changed. I did. I mean, I was against cannabis from you know, since I was little and raised in Southern Illinois, and, you know, thought that all cannabis or all marijuana was bad. And then Coltyn got sick and my eyes opened and I changed my mind, and I changed it. I mean, I did like a 720. It's still, I'm still spinning, I think. The efficacy of the cannabis plants on so many of these diseases that these kids have is so grand. And people don't, you're right, people don't want to talk about that. People want to say, you know, grab those headlines that THC drops your IQ. I would rather have an amotivational kid, or a kid like, you know, that had a 73 and now is a 70 IQ than a dead kid. And that is just exactly what this is. Do you think morphine makes his IQ drop? Probably. Is there studies on that? Hell, I don't know. I haven't looked at it.
I mean, I've been put on medications that have way worse side effects than cannabis. I mean, I was on one medication. It could cause, you know, 5 different forms of cancer.
Yeah.
And you're concerned about cannabis?
It doesn't make any sense.
I wasn't even FDA approved for it, and they put me on it anyway.
It's crazy. A lot of this stuff is just, you know, still the reefer madness mentality. And a lot of parents have it, and a lot of legislators have it still. We just got back from Washington, D.C. About a month and a half ago, and we talked to one legislator that was like, no, it's bad for you. We think it's a horrible drug. We don't want to have anything to do with it. You know, and I'm sitting here thinking, okay, my kid has been on this for 4 years. So he started this when he was actually 13, but religiously at 14. 14 years old. He's still developing. He still has a developing brain. And he's fine.
Well, I remember when you told the story initially how he was absolutely not developing. He was wasting away to nothing. And when you started giving him cannabis, he actually started developing.
Yeah. So he was in failure to thrive.
4 means behind in growth.
4 means behind in growth. He was in failure to thrive is like he is not growing. He's not. His cognitive issues are being decreased. He is wasting away. The protein in his muscles are wasting.
And progress as developing as a human being was basically rendered down to 0.
Yeah. And now he's 18 years old. He's speaking at all these crazy events and with such intelligence, and he's taller than me now. He was way shorter than me 4 years ago. And, he's a normal kid. He's shoveling snow. He's riding his bike. He's hanging out. The only thing that he can't do is drive a car.
I would say he's above normal and he's quite exceptional.
Thank you. Thank you. We appreciate
Wendy,
it.
what daily dose is he getting right now?
So right now I take a medicine that, I helped formulate with a company called Mary's Medicinals, and it's a medicine called the Remedy 1-to-1 by Coltyn. It's exactly what I take, but, we also, like to dose it differently. For example, I like to take, 15 milligrams of both CBD and THC, and I take that oil and then I put them into little pill capsules that I order off of Amazon or buy at the local supermarket. And I would put them in pills, and then I take them like a pill 4 times a day. So a total of 60 milligrams of both CBD and THC per day.
And there are days where he can't sleep, so he takes an extra dose of THC so he can sleep. There are days where he could be up to 150 milligrams of THC. But his normal regulated dose is 60 milligrams a day.
So Coltyn, how do you go about sort of educating your school friends and the kids your peers that are your age? I mean, obviously it's a discussion that you've probably had with more than a few of them. I'm sure that the discussion of recreational versus medicinal comes up. How do you navigate that area?
Hold on. I want to say before we get into that, I want to say, I don't feel like there is a recreational situation. I feel like recreational is over the counter because I use cannabis for a bug bite or a headache or a sore muscle. And I feel like it's more, over the counter.
She doesn't have a debilitating disease to use it for, but it still benefits her.
So you can go to Walmart and you can get Tylenol and for your minor ailments, or you can go to the pharmacy and get Tylenol 3 for your major ailments. And I feel like that's kind of what it is. It's medicine across the board.
I agree as well. In fact, I even would add a third option to that, which it's preventative. Why should we wait till we get sick if we can take something that can actually get our system into a nice, running order where it's like you're preventing potential sickness? And so I'm
nutritional.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So
sorry.
When we first started cannabis, a lot of our friends and family, surprisingly, were very supportive. They, were our grandma and grandpa, we were terrified that they were going to, ream us and, have this long lecture about how my parents are terrible people. And they said, well, why aren't you in Colorado right now? Why haven't you left yet? So, as we learn, because we didn't know, we knew just as much as they did. So the more that we learned about cannabis and about the community and the industry surrounding it, the more we would talk to them about it and educate them. And it was just kind of a learning process because then they would get curious and then they would learn something and then they would teach us about it. So it's a really great, circle of education when it comes to our friends and family.
Every one of Coltyn's grandparents takes CBD.
Well, you know what? This is the thing. For the longest time, you had, Rastafarians and hippies were the ones preaching this word, and they were looked at as down upon. And so people really wanted to listen to nothing that they said. But now when you have a child who's going to be educating you on this, and not only just any child, but a child that potentially actually saved their own lives, and if not saved their own lives, increased the quality of their lives somewhat astronomically, and now you're related to them and you have love for them, it's going to be much easier to hear that message that these same, Rastafarians have been singing about in reggae music for 40 plus years, and just being looked down upon, laughed at, in fact, and I've always said it from the state of view that young, sick children are the last leg that prohibition has to stand on, and it's crumbling underneath them, because this just takes apart their entire argument of, oh, well, it's, like I remember a friend of mine who was suffering from wasting syndrome from the AIDS medication he was on, and he went to his doctor, and the doctor said, listen, the cannabis is going to raise your blood pressure. It's going to have you snacking on all sorts of bad things, and you're going to potentially have a high blood pressure, maybe a heart attack. And this is a guy who was literally like months away from dying. And he's like, what is my doctor thinking, telling me that I'm going to get high blood pressure? I'm like on the cusp of death. I just need to eat food, and that's what it was doing for him. So
yeah, and that's the way it was with Coltyn completely. He was on the cusp of death, and we didn't know what to do. It definitely hasn't raised his blood pressure any. And I think that the stigma with all the Rastafarians and the hippies were just wrong. I mean, every day I thank God for those people, because if they wouldn't have kept up with their fight and their love and their passion for this plant, my kid wouldn't be here today. And we really need to respect those people and appreciate the torment and the hell that they went through trying to tell us the truth when we weren't listening. And I just have so much respect for just anybody anymore, because I don't care what they look like. We always get, oh, you're the all-American family. And we are, we do look like that all-American family, and we are able to walk into legislators' offices and get listened to, because we look like that all-American family, which is so wrong. We have created this social stigma of what you're supposed to look like and what you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to act. And, and I look back at where the cannabis plant has come from and where it is now. And it was our Rastafarians. It was our hippies that brought it here. And, I thank God for them every single day. You have no idea, how thankful and grateful I have been to those people.
Very well said, Wendy. I agree as well. It's the keepers of the plant. Who knows where this plant would be if it wasn't for people who were willing to, not just people who were willing to, make money off prohibition, but people who really knew the importance of protecting these genetics and keeping them alive. Amazing people like Skunkman Sam, who traveled the world to all the hash producing countries and collected seeds and bred incredible medicinal cultivars. Props to all of you guys who have been doing this for so many decades, really.
Hey, Mark, can I ask Coltyn a question?
Please.
Hey, Coltyn, in your medicine, so it's a 1-to-1 THC CBD, is that right? Is that what you said it was?
Yes, it's isolated CBD and THC with terpenes reintroduced.
With terpenes, okay. And so when you take it to control your medical condition, you also think that you can feel what's called psychoactivity? Like, do you feel debilitated, like dizzy, or, the so-called high? I'm just trying to understand whether or not there's that sweet spot of having a efficacious treatment to control your medical condition, but that doesn't create the high that would maybe frighten some patients or keep some patients from wanting to try cannabinoid therapy?
Now that's a very good question. And the first thing that I tell people when they ask that is first not to be afraid of THC, because if they're scared that it's going to damage their kid's brain, then why are other kids using it for their seizures? So I always say, well, what we did is we microdosed. So what we did is we took the oil that I take and we started with a very small amount, and we slowly, increased that dosage until, okay, if I go above this line, I'm going to feel some kind of intoxication. We're going to stay right here. So our goal is basically to put as much CBD and as much THC in my system as possible without feeling that intoxication.
So, and what level is that for you right now? And does that level change according to patient or body weight or different medical condition?
We haven't noticed that body weight had an issue with it when it comes to Crohn's disease. We have noticed that Crohn's disease is Crohn's disease is Crohn's disease is Crohn's disease in anybody. It's the same mechanism that's causing the inflammation, but it has nothing to do with weight or anything like that, or if you're male or female. We know a little girl that is taking 20 milligrams per dose, which is 5 milligrams higher than what Coltyn's is. And then we know a gentleman who's about 250 pounds that only takes 5 milligrams. So it really, my husband had a really good analogy. Everybody has potholes. Everybody has their road that has their potholes. And maybe my potholes are, I have 10 and Coltyn only has 8. And maybe you have 15. So we just need that amount of cannabinoids to fill our potholes.
That's a good analogy.
Number of receptors, right? So if your potholes are the little areas that the molecules need to bind into, what you're saying is that a certain level of disease or medical condition could affect the level of receptors, or even our own body's way of regulating the endocannabinoid system is by changing the number of receptors and how those receptors are expressed during a variety of different conditions, such as the inflammatory response, which is really just underpins a lot of, malfunction in the body when there is inflammation, and what the inflammation occurs from, whether it's from a wound or whether it's from something in the diet or whether it's from buildup of toxins. There's all kinds of reasons for it. But I think, like Coltyn, you're a perfect example of, again, like sort of the use of cannabinoids as hormones, because hormones have an impact on growth and how your body is basically looking for certain things in its diet and in nutrition to catalyze growth and to catalyze the formation of new bone cells and new muscle cells. And your whole experience that you had, which was, again, that cannabinoids were somehow at the point of catalyzing that growth above and beyond your medical condition, was just, is a real testament to how, again, I'll go back to something I interjected before when Marcus was talking, that these things are not only preventative, but they're nutritional. So CBD will be a fortified item in foods for years to come, from baby food through geriatric medicine, because it's a fat-soluble antioxidant that is doing preventative damage from free radical mediated oxidation in fatty tissues. And most antioxidants, like vitamin C, are water soluble. They don't get into fatty tissues. Fortunately, the cannabinoids and body has evolved mechanisms to hold on to them, which is why we can't pass a urine test very quickly. And it shows that our body is basically holding on to these molecules because they're so useful and so beneficial to fighting disease and fighting things like free radical mediated damage in fatty tissue. So in your pancreas and in your brain and in any place where there's fatty tissue, there's cannabinoids if you're using them and you're getting them at the right level to where basically their metabolic products are being stored within, your fatty and your adipose tissue, which is actually helping you stay healthy. And as you burn that tissue, those are released throughout your body and eventually excreted. But, the other question I wanted to go back to Forrest and ask, I know that we were talking a little bit about distillate-based products versus whole extracts. And I think that we had talked about this on a previous episode of Hash Church, Forrest, where you were looking, again, for different suppliers and looking at how it comes down to now the extraction process that you're using if you're making a whole plant extract, because the whole plant is being extracted now and not all extraction processes are created equal, right? So you have things like dry sift, which is an extraction process, or you have solvent methods where it dissolves everything that's in the plant and brings it out. So what I'm trying to understand from Forrest is your plant extracts that are being used for your formulations, are they ethanol-based extracts? And if they're ethanol-based extracts, I'd like to get an idea of like, what are the other components that are coming along for the ride that we should, look to see in other extraction methods when we look at whole plant extracts? Because I do believe in everything that you guys were saying about entourage effects and that there's a lot of soluble and maybe not so soluble components that are being extracted in the extraction process. I'd like to understand like what those components are and how we can make sure that those are in whole plant extracts versus somebody just making distillate and adding it to some hemp seed oil or something like that.
Yeah. No, that's a good question. And this is a great conversation. I have some things to add on dosing as well. And we're getting a lot of questions on the chat about different conditions and how they respond. But to get to that question first, yes, I have become a diehard fan through trial and error and seeing what works and what doesn't of cold ethanol wash extraction. We've just the first run, get the ethanol out, leave it as is. There's a lot of really good closed loop systems now with some of our extractors that are able to do large amounts. The old fashioned, but quite expensive rotovapes, even though I've looked at some of these other sprayed mist distillers and other things. That's another conversation. But what they're doing is they are providing what I feel, comparing to the other extraction methods that we have available, barring some of the solvent-free, more work extractions that we just don't have the ability to do. And we'll just leave those out of it because I'm a big fan of those as well. But talking about CO2 and other sort of gas extractions, we get an oil that I think represents the best we can the whole plant profile of the original flower. And, you can tell right away by how it smells, when you smell a cold ethanol wash, good extract versus others. You can still.
But you're decarboxylating that oil or you're not decarboxylating it?
So we've done both. What I found is I don't see too much of a difference, actually, when we go to the final test results. And I think that has to do with the distillation process, right? And the heat involved and the time involved. We'll see a little bit more acidic compounds, but for the most part, we see a lot of it transfer over with what we're seeing anyway. So typically we decarboxylate, but the more I do test runs and compare the tests, I'm wondering if I shouldn't be, because we're not seeing too much. We get a lot of that decarboxylation through the rest of the process, unfortunately, anyway. So it hasn't been too good for acidic tinctures and acidic compounds that we use. But so what we're seeing significant terpene levels that you lose further in the distillation process. And we're seeing, as far as other cannabinoids, right, we see consistently, levels, even if there's small levels of CBG and other compounds in there that I think play a difference. But, really the main difference I see is in the percentage of terpenes. And I think that's because we're limited by what we're testing for still. I really feel that there's a lot going on that we're just not looking for yet. And you see that in that other material, other cannabinoids percentage on some of the tests that we get. So I think there's a lot there that we're not aware of. But what I've noticed, if I could boil it down to one simple thing, is definitely the terpene content is higher. And whatever else is in there is having an effect that we're learning about now. But it definitely, there without a doubt, when we try it in the real world, there is a very significant difference in efficacy. So that's what we stick to. And as far as, we're getting a lot of questions on here about dosing and what works right for what conditions. And we're talking a little bit about milligram dosing with Coltyn and others. And your question about, where is that level that seems to work? And, with working with over 190 children at this point, all the things I've done with my own son, I have seen absolutely close to no consistent pattern whatsoever, with a few exceptions where we have conditions like we're learning about Dravet syndrome and others that have specific genetic markers that are tied to specific receptors. We can start to get we see a little more trends on what tends to work with those kids. But I think it goes back to learning about kind of some of Dr. Russo's theories and others about an endocannabinoid tone. I think there's so many different things that can go wrong in the system. And I think a lot of times we look at a consequence and we try to determine what is necessary for that consequence. Meaning, if your endocannabinoid system isn't functioning properly, and say the consequence of that poorly functioning neurotransmitter and electrosignal control is a seizure, right, or a migraine, or an incident with IBS, right, or some other sort of flare up, right? You can start to look at those incidences. And I think what we want to do is say, well, there's the consequence, but so what is needed? But what I've begun to feel, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, Mark, looking at the lack of consistency and reading, and learning more about the ECS, it seems that consequence does not necessarily equate to causality. And there's several different things that can go wrong in this system that will result in the same inability for the body to not regulate neurotransmitter and electrical signaling properly. So we could be not producing anandamide into arachidonyl glycerol or these other research on these other cannabinoids receptors, right? Looking at a lot of the mental health problems, it looks like a lot of it could be malformed CB1 and CB2 receptors so that they can't bind properly. We could not be producing the enzyme necessary.
Are we froze up? Usually if I wait a few, 10 seconds, it'll kind of unfreeze, but I guess Forrest will have to.
I thought it was me freezing up.
Yeah, I've blasted a few vape exhales here, and I was also kind of like, is he coming back?
You're kind of frozen too.
Oh no!
I want to jump in for a second. I think, Mark, you said something that I say a lot with the folks that I work with who need cannabis. There's something about a sweet spot, and Coltyn, you made reference to this as well, where you get enough cannabis phytocannabinoids into the bloodstream where you're seeing benefit for the condition you're trying to treat, while keeping the dose low enough that depending on what your need is, the THC is not an issue for you, that person. And the thing that's fascinating about THC and psychoactivity and whatnot is you can view it as a side effect that's problematic, or you can view it as a side effect that is beneficial. Like in my case, I enjoy the psychoactivity of THC, but to me, there's an undeniable benefit of CBD and THC together. I love that Coltyn's remedy that you mentioned earlier is more or less equal parts CBD and THC. And I don't know about the solvent type or the extraction that you're doing, but yeah, I would really like to follow up with what Forrest was sharing about cold ethanol and rosin. He alluded to rosin, but pointed out how much labor is involved in doing it, and we have already a lot of things going on. But I'm pretty sure that there's things going on in the cannabis plant with all the different varieties. It's not just CBD and THC or even CBC or CBN or the other cannabinoids that we test for, but isn't there something like 100 and some cannabinoids been identified in cannabis, and then a whole bunch of other terpenes? And we know that the mix of cannabinoids and terpenes has really profound effects in how it plays out for people on the adult use or recreational side, if you will. But when we're looking at it in the medical realm, it really becomes important what specific plant is going to be of benefit to different people. And then the dosing thing, again, I say to the people that we're trying to help is you have to sort it out for yourself. You find that sweet spot. Your body will tell you when you're getting benefit and you're still comfortable with it.
I think that's the value of cannabis, and it's such a limitation of people because we're very much like, oh, well, I think this is the best. Well, this is what's best for me. And so I think cannabis is a quiver, and that it's all about having all of these extraction processes and doing monomolecular medicines with and without terpenes added, and doing full plant profiles and everything in between. Because it's a plant that you don't have to go to just once to hone in and dial in to what works for you. You can go through the quiver and shoot each arrow to find that spot that works for you. Because, you know, as humans, it's like, well, if something's great for one person, it doesn't necessarily mean that's how it's going to be great for the next person. And a lot of people who have these intense epileptic diseases and whatnot have found very much that, how it's a very specific profile. That's how Halley's Comet got named here in BC, based on Haley Rose and her form of epilepsy and her specific brain and what works specifically well for her. It's not to say that that plant's not going to work for a lot of people, but to me, the real value of cannabis is the quiver. It is a plant that brings so many things. And just imagine, not only medicinal, recreational, and preventative aspects from the resin gland, but also essential amino acid rich seeds that literally contain all of the essential amino acids that our body needs but can't produce, including the 3 required for children. And then 50 to 100,000 commercial products through the cellulose and the fiber and the actual plant. So it's pretty incredible when you really break this plant down, not only as a medicine, but its ability to do all of these other things, produce plastics and metals and produce incredibly healthy seed oils. It's mind-blowing, really.
I think it's almost like every human has their own DNA, and so doesn't cannabis. And we just have to find that right cannabis plant for our DNA. You know, it's just so vast out there. It's crazy. And we say all the time, you know, Coltyn has his own product, but that doesn't mean that that product is going to help your Crohn's disease. It helps his. But that doesn't mean that it's going to help yours and that you're going to need the exact same dose. This is not Humira or not Tylenol, where you can just go to the store, get it, and it's going to take care of it. It's, you know, it's not a one size fits all. And we've noticed that throughout the years, you know, helping people with Crohn's disease, that it isn't a one size fits all. And
that's a good thing, because we're not a one size fit. We don't have a one size fits all system to process those kind of things.
But we feel like as how medicine has been normalized, that we go to the doctor and he hands us these pills and he says, this is going to take care of your illness. And that we have that instant gratification most of the time, and that this is supposed to work. And if it doesn't work right off the bat, you have to give it time. And then we go back to the doctor and say, hey, this didn't work or that didn't work. Cannabis is the same way. You know, just because you're using cannabis doesn't mean that you have the right strain and that you have the right amount of cannabinoids in that strain or terpenes. You may have to find a different one, but you will find something somewhere.
Everyone likes to use that argument that, oh, well, Bob Marley smoked weed all the time, but he died of cancer. Well, that's because just because he was smoking weed doesn't mean that he was smoking the right kind of weed that he needed for his illness. And, you know, I'm pretty sure he also smoked a lot of cigarettes in his time too. But, you know, everyone has their own different levels that they need for their own different illnesses. Because for each person, you know, for every cannabinoid, it's going to affect not only the person differently, but the disease as well. We actually found that Crohn's cells have CB2 receptors attached to them, and they're just sticking out like a switch, and they're waiting for THC to pass by to flip that switch, and then THC will flip that switch, and the inflammation will go away, and then the CBD will help heal the damage that the Crohn's disease had done.
Well, we have everybody says, oh, this is the tip of the iceberg. The tip of the iceberg is not even close to what we are.
It's more like the tip of Antarctica.
Yeah, it's so crazy how much more science and how much more research and development we really need to do on this plant. And
they need to make it accessible. You know, in my opinion, we're at the point where we know it's safe enough that it's like, you know what, the science is important, but basically open the floodgates, let this accessible, and the science can catch up and maybe not have to torture small rodents and animals. You can actually even just look at the people who are currently using it, because there are so many.
About the animal testing thing just for a second, just so you guys all know. I mean, so it's unfortunate, but the way that they determine the safety of a lot of the things that are in the human diet and the things that humans are exposed to in terms of environmental hazards is unfortunately using animal testing models. They're not always accurate, but typically they're an indicator on how things are going to behave in humans. And when you were talking, Mark, before about that one test where they're environmentally insulting by inhalation toxicity, yeah, that's a very, very torturous test that they send animals through to make sure that the compounds that are in the products and the fragrances and the toothpaste and the ice creams that humans buy and use are safe. And what they do is they try to establish where the level of effect or observed effects are. And so they try to establish where that level is by basically overdosing the animals until they don't die anymore. And they're like, okay, at that point, that's sort of like the lethality thing. Where do we not see narcosis in the animals? Where do we not see the animals be lethargic? In the case you were talking about, Mark, it's what's called a genealogy study, where basically they have the environmental insult happen to a mother that then gives offspring, and then they look for any kind of, abnormalities that could be passed on to the offspring in those animals that's due to the treatment that they were exposed to as mothers or as breeding adults. So the point is that there's a lot of this sort of animal testing that goes on. It's gone on for ages, and it's how they've established toxic levels of a variety of different things. And in some cases, they've done that testing directly on humans. So this is like testing where this is where we see an effect in humans at this dose. For example, butane, I think 5,000 ppm is typically what the upper limit is of butane contamination in cannabis extracts. Some states have it even lower than that, but the reason why it's set at 5,000 ppm, it's not like a bolt from lightning came down from heaven. That's where they've observed what's called the acute no effect level. So people can be exposed at that level and not acutely be affected by it. You won't fall over and die. At higher levels, yeah, in laboratory animals and in this case in humans, they actually have shown that, yeah, these things can actually cause, some type of effect. And so it is unfortunate, but in the society we live in, everything from your air fresheners to things that are used in laundry detergents, things that are used in all kinds of household products have to be tested to determine their safety and to determine how they impact human safety and environmental impact as well. And so a lot of that, unfortunately, was done with with animals. They now actually have testing where you don't have to do it in animals. They can actually do it in the computer. It's based on animal testing and all this data bank mining that they can do based on the level of data that exists. But let's face it, if you develop something new, sometimes you have to do some level of testing before you give it to humans.
Well, the thing that surprised me was when I spoke to some of the scientists who did some of these experiments, I was like, well, why do you have to give the rats so much? And then the guy said some big scientific words. He was basically like, well, the rats are so-and-so, which was basically him saying that the rats require like 10 times more to get high. They don't get high the same way humans do. And I'm like, well, how do you know that? And he's like, well, we don't really. It was like a guess. We just guessed it because we don't see any effects. So we don't really know if they are high. We can give them quite a bit and there's no effect. So we have to give them a lot to see any effects. And I'm like, well, that's insane. That's completely an insane way to gather data, at least for cannabis.
Yeah, that doesn't seem right. I mean, I know that there's mice that are specifically bred for cannabis.
Yes, they did create mice. They also spoke about that, which was also,
right, which is, I know it's kind of creepy and everything like that, but it's, again, we now understand things at a molecular level, and biology is just a manifestation of chemistry. So
yes.
It's just an interesting thing again. And when we look at like Coltyn and so many other people who have the situation where it's really, as Dr. Russo would say, an endocannabinoid deficiency, where, to go back to the pot analogy, which I think is beautiful, by the way, especially when you consider pot and holes, I don't know. Anyway, so the pot hole analogy would say that, again, there is a dance that's played in between molecules that are binding to these receptors. And the more we understand about the molecular nature of that interactions and what's responsible for those interactions in these diseases and how those interactions underpin these diseases, we'll really have a better grasp on how it all works and how it can be parlayed into cannabinoid-based therapy from the plant we all know and love.
Indeed.
I want to jump in and say that I think chemistry is an attempt to understand biology and put a name on it. Not that it's wrong. I'm like I said, I love the science that comes with this work, but the plant is so
biology
complex.
is just Mother Nature's chemistry, right? It's like, okay, so Mother Nature had this chemistry set. It's all in water, and when you think about it, the fascination of biochemical synthesis and some of the metabolites that are isolated from sponges and whatnot and snake venoms. I mean, these are very, very complex molecules that it would take a synthetic chemist like me years to make and construct from different building blocks. And Mother Nature can do it like she's farting out, bacteria and yeast. And it's unbelievable. There's now actually technology to make cannabinoids in yeast. So just like you're brewing beer, you can make cannabinoids. And this is just the beginning of the merger of modern methods in biotechnology with what it can do for cannabinoid production. So I'm absolutely convinced when CBD production happens in big food and starts being fortified into all different kinds of food, that CBD will not come from plants in a greenhouse. It will certainly come from engineered yeast to make cannabinoids.
We saw those guys speak as well, the ones that are producing synthetically cannabinoids in a lab right now. And that was
which group, Mark? There's a couple doing it now.
Well, I can't off the top of my head remember, but I did take a picture of one of his slides.
Were they from California or Florida? Which group?
Florida sounds actually.
Yeah. So Florida is probably the Tiwa group, right? Does that ring a bell?
Not really. There were so many different groups. It was.
I mean, there's a couple different groups that are doing this now. It's really exciting technology, and just some people.
Again, Mark, I think the challenge is that if you're genetically engineering yeast to produce a specific cannabinoid, how do you know that the specific cannabinoid you get is what's needed for the various conditions you're trying to treat? Again, I think the mother plant, cannabis, is such an incredibly complex organism, if you will. It's like, my understanding, it's like 80 to 100 million years that plant has been on this planet. And human beings have only been here, what, a couple of 100,000 years? So we can try and reproduce what she can do for us, but I don't think we always are going to hit the nail right on the head. I don't think there's only one or two things being provided by that plant. That's
absolutely. You know, like if you do an alcohol extraction, you're probably extracting a fair amount of water soluble material that you wouldn't be extracting if you were, say, doing like a butane, or even if you're doing a natural infusion like an olive oil infusion or some vegetable oil or seed oil infusion. So again, these are all, I guess, what Marcus would call different little, quivers or arrows in the quivers, to use the metaphor. But it just, I think what it creates is, again, different types of extracts in terms of their phytochemical makeup. And so I think what I was trying to, get out of talking with Forrest was trying to understand. I know it's a very complex medical condition that Silas suffers from. What is that particular condition's sort of? We know what we know cannabinoids are good. It's almost like you take the cannabinoids out. What's all the rest of the stuff that really makes that formulation work for that particular medical condition? And to show, like with Coltyn's case, how you can actually measure this into a daily regimen of, let's call it nutrition, because he's nutritionally fortifying his diet with these cannabinoids that his medical condition doesn't render his body able to make on their own, to fill all the potholes that he needs, because he needs more pot to fill the holes. Oh my God, I will not use that analogy anymore, but you guys all know what I mean. I mean, so the point is that your body's level of cannabinoids is now being enhanced or fortified by something nutritional that's, by the way, in his diet. He's taking it in his mouth. He's not vaping it or anything. So it's nutrition.
Yeah, and to use the pothole analogy one more time, everyone has their road and they need their potholes filled. But you also, I don't know if this will make sense, but you also have to make sure that you're using the right cement to fill those potholes. Because, a lot of people need certain cannabinoids. There are other cannabinoids that they're better off staying away from. Just for example, I'd say about a couple of years ago, we started experimenting with THCV. And we found that it was an appetite suppressant. And that's great for somebody with diabetes or someone who just wants to lose weight, but it is detrimental to someone with a wasting disorder. Mm-hmm. So you have to really think about, what cannabinoids are good for you and which ones really aren't.
Wouldn't it be great if we just had a blood test that we could just pull out your blood and say, okay, these are where you're deficient in cannabinoids, in terpenes, and then just say, okay, this is the plant that you need. Bam, there you go.
Yeah, that technology exists. They could probably do endocannabinoid profiling on individuals. That technology exists. So, I mean, maybe it's being developed, and maybe, again, the way that they'll look at things in the future. I used this metaphor loosely the other day. I was like, the endocannabinoid system is the body's own pharmaceutical company. And so if you keep that endocannabinoid system nurtured, mostly through diet, but I think also there's a lot has to do with your genes and like your healthiness, but also maintaining a good diet, because you are what you eat. I think our friend Todd used to tell us that. But at the end of the day, what you take into your body is a manifestation of what your body has to use to fight itself against this, onslaught of environmental toxins that we're all exposed to every day in this world. So it's a good thing to be able to keep that system fortified and nurtured, and to know that you can do it every day and not be completely debilitated where you're, knocked out or zonked out on the couch like you would be if you're on an opiate or a handful of other medications. It's just so much safer and better for people.
Yeah, that would be great. We're a long way off from that, but boy, would that be great. I mean, CBD and these other cannabinoids work on so many different receptor points, and their pharmacological effects are so varied, that it's what they call a dirty drug, because it doesn't stick to one receptor point. So we really have this large impact of cannabinoids, which is why we see this large impact of effect. But I know I got cut off earlier, and just so I don't want to go over it again in case it was all covered. But the reality is we have compounds now that can interact with receptor sites that we haven't had access to before on this level, and we can interact with them relatively, and that's being conservative, extremely safely. So because a consequence, an issue that happens doesn't necessarily dictate causality. We have to experiment and fix your road, because so many different things can be causing the same sort of symptoms that we see expressed externally. But back to where we talked about with kids, we feel comfortable doing this because of the documented history of safety that cannabis has. And when you see people with real critical illness, and this is where the conversation with kids gets really conflated, is there's a big difference between neurotypical healthy kids should be getting ready for college and they start sitting around taking bong rips all day. That too isn't cannabis's fault, but it's just maybe not what's best in their life at that time, and treating real critical illness. And when you have people with these critical illnesses, it's even harder to demonstrate some sort of negative impact. And because of the safety, because of the efficacy, when we're able to go through different cannabinoid profiles, measure, judge, and track how your body responds, there is a lot of potential if you treat proactively with cannabis, methodically, by really paying attention to what you're treating. There is a lot of potential for benefit. And it's really great that the cannabis community and all these new people who are not in the cannabis community are coming together to kind of teach this message, because it really is about public education. I mean, we get asked all the time, how do these kids smoke all that pot, right? A lot of people don't even understand that cannabis is more than just rolling joints these days. So, when we're able to bring these people in, and families like Coltyn's family and people like Mark, and this shows like this that can provide education, everyone who listens and then takes that information out into the world, we really see changes inside communities that are going to lead to cannabis reaching its greatest potential for social good. And I always felt that we've just barely begun to grasp how much benefit in our communities and our society that cannabis can have. We're just starting to get our handle on it. But what is great, just like was said before, is that when you can kind of segregate yourself, for political views, right? You can only watch CNN, you can only watch Fox News, but the reality is that illness and disease is non-discriminatory, and it hits everybody from every demographic. And when it hits your family, it is the slap in the face that the human brain needs to snap out of their paradigm and ideology. And when it hits your family, then it's your loved one or yourself whose life is on the line. All that programming and brainwashing from being raised under propaganda about cannabis flies out the window. And that's why one of the missions with the Caldrius Network, and why we work for free and don't charge any of our families, is that we feel that when people come in from our sheriff's department or from our military backgrounds, from different church groups, demographics that tend to have some of the most stigma against cannabis, and we can not only be there to help them, but have them see the benefit in their kids' lives without bleeding them dry, it changes communities and it changes hearts and minds. And when that one person's child is saved in that church group, the whole church experiences that. And and these are both true stories. And when the sheriff comes, the person who works for the sheriff's department comes, top secret and scared because they feel like they're making a drug deal just to save their kids, and they're worried about their coworkers finding out. And it's able to help and save the life of that child. That trickles into that community. And this is why we're never going back to where we were with cannabis. I mean, organizations like SAM and others who are trying to keep the good old days of prohibition just really don't grasp the impact that that sort of benefit has on communities. And we're seeing it slowly trickle across the country, and really it comes down to just education and where we started, the elimination of stigmas. You know,
You couldn't
Here in Washington,
perfectly.
here in Washington, okay, excuse me.
Oh,
Here
sorry.
in Washington, yeah, here in Washington, we've had legalization for coming up on 6 years now. And what it's really done is brought about real normalization, you know, and the neighbors aren't so afraid of cannabis anymore. And I've been teaching 6 semesters at Clark College, co-instructing a course there, Cannabis in Your Health. And it's really opened it up. Now the local community college is up to having us in there. We're working on 7 semesters. I do bringing your plants to fruition, you know, for highest yields and best, you know, best quality cannabis in the summer. And so the community is really open. We're getting a lot of sick patients in there. And basically, like everybody's saying, we start low and slow with everybody. We tell them we have a lot of Parkinson's patients coming in and people that are just interested. Then an offshoot of that is we started, there's a medical group that takes care of themselves. So they meet at my friend Jeremy's house like once a month, and they share strains and they share ideas, and they you know, they're promoting the plant in a real positive way up here in Washington. So that's what we've seen up here in Washington. As far as like the federal research goes, we've been seeing them kick the research can down the road since the 70s. And then in the 80s, again, they kicked the research can down the road because I was on Como News here in Seattle, doing a town hall meeting a couple weeks ago, and the main thing from the state was they're saying it's such a complicated plant. It's so complicated, you know. And so as far as federal research goes, we definitely have to deschedule, not reschedule. We've been saying this for years because that just pulls everybody out of the game, and it only leaves the pharmaceutical companies in charge. And I think that's our biggest competition in here. With legalization and stuff, we've seen all the small medical mom and pops pretty much are gone. And with the legal system, they're doing acquisitions and mergers, and it's big, huge. And you guys are seeing it in California down there too. These mega farms popping up all over the place. I really feel sorry for all the people in Humboldt that really brought us the show to be wiped out of participating in the new system. So that's my 2 cents.
Thanks, Tom. Did you have something to say, Wendy?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I just wanted to give everybody a story about, and I think Forrest just knocked it out of the park, because it is it's changing in the communities. When we moved to Colorado, we didn't tell anybody that we were going. We were terrified, and then when we went, well, when Coltyn and Tommy moved, they came back to get us about 6 months later, and we were packing our bags to put into the U-Haul to take everything back to Colorado. And our neighbor, who is a very, very religious, Pentecostal, hair in a bun, you know, blue jean skirt type Pentecostal, goes to church all the time, just a salt of the earth person, love her to death. She walked across the road to talk to us. And my husband was terrified. He thought that he was going to get a reaming, and she didn't. She expressed how much gratitude she had for us sharing our story, for doing what we did. She is telling all of her church friends about us. It changed our community. We just went to the local bar the other night to watch one of our friends play music. And one of the police chiefs, our police deputies, came up to me and said, "I'm glad you're home." We are changing things, all of us, and it just takes stories. It just takes keep talking about it. It takes everybody not being afraid to wear a cannabis shirt into Walmart. and get those looks and ask and have those questions asked of you and tell the truth, because that's the main thing, is getting the truth out is going to help our cause the most.
As long as the mentality of cannabis is changed, it doesn't matter how long they try and prohibit or spread propaganda about it. Cannabis will become legal as soon as, you know, everyone agrees that it's the best thing to do for not only our people but for our country and in the world as well.
And if it doesn't, we'll all just turn into hippies.
Well, you can always move up to Canada. We got some federal laws going on up here. We'd welcome you with open arms. I think America's going to do it. I think it's the only thing holding it back worldwide. All these other countries doing it is one thing, but it's America, right? America is the country. It's the country that exports its culture through media and movies and music in a way that no other country does. And that's why everyone in every other country, they love that culture. They love that music and those movies and those shows and all of these different things. And, you know, that's how the propaganda was able to be pushed so far and so wide. News stories, yes, but like, you know, derogatory jokes in comedy movies and, you know, like different things that were done in these powerful mediums. I mean, my God, a newspaper story it just changes the minds of tens of thousands of people. And it's like an amazing story like Coltyn's or like Silas and the Caldrius Network. And it's just like, why aren't we touching like 100,000 people a day? This is a very powerful message.
I think it's just because we're not getting to the mainstream media like we should be. I think that we need to have, you know, we've been on the well, we haven't, but you know, there's been people that have been on the doctors and the Dr. Oz show, but I just don't think that we're getting to the mainstream media like we should. Like, we really need to be pushing that. We get call our Facebook messages from people all over the world every single day. Facebook has been a godsend to our family and our message, but that's as far as it's gone is Facebook. You know, we really need to get out there and tell and show people, look, he's 35 nanograms and he's fine. He's not high. He's taking a lot of THC, and we need to get those stories out. I don't know how to do it. Well,
also, why is 4 different types or 5 different types of cancer a side effect okay, but getting high isn't? Like, it's the worst thing on the planet to experience euphoria, because here's the thing, like, euphoria is kind of fun, especially for people who have come along during a time where they haven't been as ingrained in the fear and the propaganda, because that's really one of the worst things about getting a little too high on cannabis is the propaganda that you carry with you subconsciously about this plant. It creates this paranoid feeling. Well, where do you think that paranoia comes from? It comes from the police kicking your door down, taking your kids away, throwing you in jail, and destroying your life. That's a pretty heavy vibe to be.
Coltyn is really funny when he's high. We've gotten him high before, and he is hilarious, and he feels good. So what's so wrong with that? I mean, isn't the point of taking all these medications is to feel good and be happy?
I'm telling you. And when I saw Michaela on the documentary Stoned Kids, which I think Vice has since changed the name of that documentary, but it was called Stoned Kids, and Michaela, Brandon's young daughter, who was 8 or 9 years old and developed this harsh leukemia, they were asking her, like, she was on high doses of THC, and they were like, oh, what's that like? And she was just so sweet and so honest in her answers that it wasn't the nightmare that everyone is portraying. You know, it was really quite innocent, and it was clearly not a negative thing.
Yeah. We went through
so
that.
It's all about follow the money. You know, we've been seeing it all over the place. So if you can trace it back, there's really no money in cannabis if everybody can take care of themselves. So, you know, and you know, we have all these, you know, everybody's been talking about it. There's all these wonderful products that come from cannabis, and it does this amazing thing. And we have this endocannabinoid system, and it feeds it, and it keeps everybody healthy. Well, how is that good for industry? You know, right now we have in United States in general, we're more reactive than preventative in microtoxins and fecal matter in our food. You notice that when they have a recall, it's when 1,000 people have been affected. And then all they do is go after that one farm, shame that one farmer, that one processing facility, and then it's gone off the news. We don't really take a proactive matter like they do in Europe, South Korea, and Japan. I think that's where we got to start. We got to start, at America demanding that, higher quality of everything, because we're seeing the degradation and the downgrading of the cannabis here in Washington. We're way up here in the north. We have mold issues. A friend of mine, Ed from Analytical 360, told me there used to be a 30% failure rate, and then the lobbyists for the farmers and producer processors went and lobbied the state. They dropped the levels, and now there's no failures for mold. So there's moldy weed going out there. And if we want to put our best foot forward, we've been fighting for cannabis for so long, and it's so passionate to so many of us that we really have to demand that we put our best foot forward and not let happen to our regular food supply that could possibly happen to cannabis.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's through support, right? I mean, I often say you've put a really good connection there right at the end, Tom, which, I'm in this cannabis world. I see people constantly like, we need the best, we need the cleanest, and then it's like, if you look at many other aspects of their life, they're not following those rules. They're eating some of the worst quality food that you can eat. And you just
smoking
go through
cigarettes, drinking Coca-Colas, Pepsis, and then they're claiming they're patients. I have a hard time with that model too. So.
Yeah, that's the scary thing about cannabis is when you see that every other industry, every other aspect, agriculture, all of it has just been so utterly destroyed that it is kind of worrisome in the sense that that could potentially happen to cannabis as well.
And then it's all based in profit. Yeah. So the profit makers are the most important people in our oligarchic country that we live in here. So it's really sad that they use us as pawns. Because what happens when we eat bad food for all these years? Well, we end up getting cancer, and then we feed off another system, the medical system, and then the pharmaceutical system. And that's why they're fighting so hard and so tooth and nail with, keeping cannabis illegal.
True that.
Yeah.
Do you have a point, Forrest?
Well, I just totally agree. I mean, we don't do things because they're right. I mean, I love my country, but it's been set up in a way, and I think it needs to be really reviewed and assessed that, things get done because politicians are lobbied. They need support to be put in office. It costs millions of dollars, and the people who have those millions of dollars to lobby and get that support are business, and it's very difficult to get something done that doesn't have a profit motive or a business model behind it. Unfortunately, it typically takes serious death and serious attention, and people have to suffer. And then there's when there's a political price paid for it, then something is done. And really, that's what I've tried to do with our work with Silas and the Caldrius kids and stuff that Coltyn's doing. We have the hashtag Make Them Watch, right, for a reason, because they have to see the suffering. People have to start sharing that, and the stigma around cannabis has really prevented a lot of sharing. People are still afraid to share that experience. But I think that if politicians and people are going to have ideologies that have real life consequences to children and adults and people suffering from terminal illness, and they shouldn't be spared the consequences of that. And I think that this is why the social is just going to happen. Some of the legislation is changing. Some of the national things that are happening, the progress we've seen in California and other states is because of some of that social pressure. And, I think that it needs to not slow down now, because the reality is I'm confident that we're going to get there, but that shouldn't make us comfortable. Our goal is to get there with as many people still alive when we get there. And this whole it's going to happen eventually, just settle down. And I get that a lot from politicians, local and national. That time, that sense of time, that's a privilege, and it's a privilege that not everybody shares. And really, unless you have illness, you don't understand that time is a privilege. We kind of just live in our human paradigm that says we're going to live forever. But when you look at death every day, you realize that, it's going to happen. Just give it a few years isn't always an acceptable answer. We want everybody to make it to that day where they have these treatment options. So, it'd be great if we just saw the laws changing, but money rules supreme, and ideology is a close second. And we're steeped heavily in both here in the States, and it's going to take the community and the public to really hold politicians' feet to the fire. It's going to take them having to see the children who are dying, the adults who are suffering. Not just hear that AIDS wasting syndrome is being caused because of the bans and the compassion programs in California that used to treat them for years are no longer allowed to function under our quote unquote legalization. They need to see what that looks like. They need to have that experience that we have, because that experience changes people's perspective, right? It's different hearing kids have seizures, and this helps them. When the kids have the seizure in the politician's office, they tend to change their tune real quick. And so, I would just put a call out to everybody who this is important to realize that, it takes work. And the more of us who are sending emails, the more of us who are posting our experiences, even when it's embarrassing and hard, the more of it has a real impact. And if we keep it up, we'll get there, That's
why we go to Washington, D.C. That's why we knock on doors in our politicians' offices, even if they're not we're not the constituent. We want to talk to every single person that we can possibly talk to. It's absolutely ridiculous. We just got back from Oklahoma yesterday, and they just legalized a referendum. They still have a ways to go to make it an amendment, but the thing is that we have, you're right, we have to do this. I put Coltyn in front of these people and say, how can you deny him?
I've shown people, pictures of my colon, and I don't know if you think that that's not embarrassing, but it doesn't. Once you show people pictures of your colon, you're not embarrassed or scared of anything else.
Right.
But a lot of kids and a lot of patients, they need cannabis, and they're suffering without it, regardless of, whether the laws say that they should be allowed to or not. I believe 100% that we need research, and we need, clinical research for, not only the negative sides of cannabis, but also the positive sides, because most research has been, aimed towards the negative most of the time.
Yeah. There's been plenty of research on the negatives. if there was something to be found there, they've had 60 years to try to hash it out.
Yeah, it's our turn. It's our turn now. Thank you, guys. You can take your night of cash and head on over to the side and wait. It's now our turn. We're gonna look for the positives.
Well, we fought for a bill, or fought for some research in Colorado for an IBD research study, observational. And Coltyn was the first person to sign up for it. We were really excited. And one of the questions that he was asked on this research survey was,
do you still use or sell your opioids?
Like, how's that efficacy?
How does that have anything to do with cannabis? They were basically just asking me, they were asking me if I was a drug dealer.
Because he's a cannabis user. We need to get out of that situation. We really need to have surveys and observational studies that are looking at efficacy and not looking at the drug abuse situation. And we need politicians that are going to be open-minded. We need to have families. I would love to organize a group of families that are bringing their kids and saying, look at them in the face and tell them no. Because this is wrong. Not just epilepsy kids, but Crohn's kids and cancer kids and kids with autism. And, and just say, look at these kids, and cannabis is working for them. How are you going to say that they can't use it?
In 2015, I got to educate 7 agents from the CDC and NIOSH on production and processing of cannabis on my farm. We did the first workplace health and safety evaluation in the cannabis industry. The study's been published. We got the federal government to use the word cannabis instead of marijuana. They called my farm an organic farm. They said straight up said I grow organic cannabis. And what we got to do, they came twice to my farm. They came for 2 days in August, where we originally I'd set up a tour between Washington and Oregon and all these different manufacturers, processors, equipment, machine manufacturers, all this stuff to kind of keep them updated. Because when I first got on the phone with 10 agents from the CDC, they said, I asked them, well, where are you getting your information? They said YouTube. And no offense to YouTube, but I said, well, isn't that, wouldn't you like to come out for a tour? Isn't that kind of an insult to our industry? Because there's a lot of mixed information out there. Some of it's really good, some of it's really bad. I'd be happy to introduce you to the industry. And they said, yes, they were interested. So we had, I turned in the itinerary. They said yes. And then they said, no, we can't have our agents going across state lines and into operations that may be illegal. What we can do is make your farm a secure location where federal agents can learn, touch, and handle cannabis. Are you okay with that? I said, sure. They said, well, you're going to have to be vetted by the federal government to grow. You're going to have to do background checks. And we said, please, because we've always played by the rules. I'm not a mailer. I know bullshit across the country. That's just not my style. I'm all about normalizing cannabis and normalizing the plant for the better good of the plant.
Hey, Tom.
So,
Tom?
Yes, sir.
Which agency was this? Did you say the CDC?
The CDC, Center of Disease Control, and NIOSH especially. So NIOSH, so under the CDC, there's OSHA and NIOSH. OSHA is the enforcement side for workplace health and safety, and NIOSH is the scientist side. So they do all the research and write all these HHEs, health hazard evaluation. And they thought it was important enough. Well, it originally came because the Denver police union had filed a complaint that their officers were going into these, illegal indoor grows and being contaminated by mold. I mean, it was so important to them that they brought in, when they came to my farm, they brought in Coltyn, who had spent the last 2 years in Africa looking at dead Ebola victims. And they came to my farm, and we got to educate them for 2 days. We brought in the top people in the industry, JD from Skunk Farm Research, told them all about hydrocarbons, and we brought in Dana from Goat Labs, and so we brought in a lot of really qualified people. We did a farm to table. We grow old school. We grow organic vegetables and organic cannabis. It's more of a lifestyle for us than anything else. And so we brought them in and had them here for 2 days. We went and had pizza and beer. But the thing is I had one shot. They were there on my dime. And when they came to the farm, when we started at 9 o'clock in the morning, we smoked 2 joints about 10 feet away from them, did a couple dabs, and then we all went over there and said, now we're going to educate you. And we smoked throughout the 2 days, periodically like we did, and we rolled joints in front of them and the whole 9 yards. No, they didn't partake. They're scientists. I mean, hopefully we did some good, because I'm sure the current administration is going, do we have anybody who's had any, work with any of these people? And I think from what they told me, we're the first people to ever work with any federal agency when it had to do for cannabis at all in any So we had them there for 2 days. It was great. We hugged them when they got there. We hugged them when they left. They're just really normal people. A group of the same people came back in October for harvest, because that's what they were there for. They were there. They documented our harvesting, the bucking, the big leafing, all of it. You can see the report. You can go to my website, farmertomorganics.com. You can download the report. They did a lot of good work for cannabis, and I think it's a good step forward. So it was a privilege and honor for me to stand up for cannabis, and I hope it leads and takes us in the right direction.
Well, I just had the most tastiest rip while you were telling your awesome story. I can't even believe how tasty that was. I left it in the vape exhale for a little bit longer. I forgot. I was getting into listening to what you were saying. That's great work, Tom. Good on you for doing that. It's really exceptional. We need more of that. Normalization of cannabis use has been a big part of, even Hash Church for that matter. One of the reasons why I always, I don't smoke on purpose, but I smoke because I would be smoking anyway. And just, I think that it's been an interesting topic to be able to have these great conversations while certain people are still enjoying cannabinoids, while we're talking about these things.
Definitely. I just kind of hopped in my regular day mode. I got on, started rolling joints. I'm here at my summer office at the farm, and it's great to be on. Thanks so much for inviting me.
It looks like a circus yurt you're in. I like it.
Yeah, my wife picked it up several years ago, and it's been a mainstay here on our farm. And when we lived down in Williams, Oregon, we pretty much lived underneath this thing for a year.
Beautiful. Well, I always like when people come in on their farms. I never will forget Eric from when he was with Forever Flowering Greenhouses, and showing up in the empty greenhouse to do his Hash Church episode. That was awesome. Yes, Karma Cup does help with normalization in Toronto. Maybe we could have Sarah talk a little bit about what she's been doing in Toronto for the last several years. Welcome, Sarah.
Hey, Mark. Thank you so much for having me on. This is quite a deep and intense discussion you guys are having this morning. I'm on Pacific time. Normally, I'd be joining you when I'm in Toronto. So now I'm like, wow, this is quite a discussion for 9 a.m.
Oh, are you in BC?
I'm actually in California right now. I'm in San Jose.
Nice.
So, and we actually had all sorts of crazy stuff while this was going on. A cat fell off a balcony. I'm sitting outside on a balcony, and the cat fell off the balcony. We didn't realize he was off the balcony. It was a whole drama. There's like a whole scene going on. So, quite the morning. But yes, thank you for having me on. So,
absolutely.
I guess
tell us what's going on.
Spiel. Just having fun. Every day is a good day. Now it's my 5th year doing the event. So once you get to 5 years, there's challenges, always new challenges, but you start to feel a level of confidence in what you've created. And I'm super happy to be doing it again. So same thing as always, festival, competition. I've got all sorts of categories and lots of good bud and hash and other cannabis products coming in. Always my goal is to improve the level of education and awareness of like what good stuff actually is, what good products actually are, and to try and promote that amongst the community. To raise palates, let's say.
Absolutely.
Well as, I feel like it's
important.
Yeah, and I'm not a weed scientist, so I can't contribute on that level, unfortunately or fortunately, whatever. But this is my area that I can contribute on. I am a critic, and I've got a band of 200 critics that judge with me every year. So. Let me just review the categories real quick. And if any of the viewers out there are interested in possibly entering, we need it July 27th in Toronto. So you can send it by mail or you can meet us in person, one day only. So I've got buds, indica sativa hybrid, concentrates, indica sativa hybrid, solvent extracts, solventless extracts, high terpene and cold extraction type stuff, live resin, sauce, diamonds, all that stuff. Distillate. We do edibles, shelf stable only, please. Pre-rolls, CBD products. So any kind of CBD product, we've got a category for that stuff. Pen and topical. So we need 200. We need it by July 27th, no labels. It's a completely blind competition. I hate the hype machine and allowing that to dominate like what should be real people finding out what they like about products. I don't want the hype machine to contaminate that.
Well, I've been to the event, I don't know, 3 or 4 years out of the 5 now, I suppose.
Yes, I believe so. 3.
And you know what? One of the things I like about it, I don't focus much on the competition part of it because I never really have in any of the cups that I've gone to, but I like the group of people that you bring. Toronto's in a very unique position in Ontario. It's a very populated province, and there's just tons of cities all around Toronto that people come in from, and quite a bit of young people, people in their 20s. And so it's for me, it's a great time to be like, I see a lot of super excited people, and I'm kind of surprised by the level of knowledge they already hold at such a young age about the plant. And they're hungry. They're showing up to, not just judge cannabis, but to like meet all these different people that they know through social media that have either inspired them or whatnot, the D420Ks and the Johnny B's and whatnot. And it's just a really all around great event in that sense. I just get a small booth. I never have business cards. I don't have flyers. I don't even have a sign on my booth. I have no promotions whatsoever of my company. It's just me and usually some friends. And it's just really great. I do it really for the meeting of all these incredible young people that are coming out to these events. And just, it's great to see. Vancouver has nothing like it. We throw a cup every once in a while, every 6 months to a year, and they just kind of peter out. They've never had any real substance to them, aside from back in the day when Mark Emery was throwing the Tokers Bowls. Those were incredible. I think it's definitely, somewhat, I'm not a huge proponent of like a High Times Cannabis Cup style, but I do love, and Sam and I have both said this about the High Times Cannabis Cup, even from back in the day, that it brought people together. I wouldn't have met the majority of the people I've met in the cannabis industry had it not been for those early, 95, 96, 97 cups in Amsterdam. And it's good to see people like Sarah are continuing it, in places like Toronto, Canada. There's the Emerald Cup down in California. There's all these certain events that are definitely incredible times to go and be able to meet. Remember, we don't really still have a place to gather, and just legally smoke and enjoy our time together. It's something that is an important form of civil disobedience, the same way we're fighting for the rights to use this plant as a medicine and the rights to be able to even purchase it, whether you believe in recreation or not recreationally, but also to be able to gather and join and enjoy cannabis and share that information. That's one of the things, an important factor that they've broken up and they don't kind of seemingly want to have happen. Vapor lounges, would there not be so many more if they were licensed and legal? I mean, there's 60 to 70,000 medical users in Canada alone, federally medical users. You'd think there'd be places where they could go and enjoy their medicine legally. Hey, welcome D420K.
Hey, how you doing, everybody?
Fuck, I didn't even get to welcome you last time. You came in and right out of the room.
Well, Forrest was trying to come back in. I wanted to make some room. I was really enjoying his story. Everybody's story on here just blows my mind, man. It's the viewers. Thank you for all you viewers and the support you guys have done. The show you've done, Mark, here is just can't speak enough of it. The Forrest story with his son and everything. Like I had an experience with my grandson last month. He ended up getting a cut right above his eye, and he had to get stitches. And just this stuff that he went through in that little moment for me was friggin' heart-wrenching, heartbreaking. And for you guys, the parents that go through what you go through with your kids and children and everything, with what you're doing, holy shit, man, it just kills it. It touches my heart in such a huge way. You guys are the strongest warriors I've ever listened to. I get goosebumps right now talking about it. This bong rip is for you. Bong rip, everybody. If I keep talking, I'm going to start tearing up. So thanks to everybody. You guys' love is just incredible.
It's very true. Well said, Darren, in the sense of what some of these parents are going for. Even, right now, Forrest just mentioned that Silas has had a seizure and dropped a glass. He's got to step out for a second. Hopefully we're going to have him back later, and he's going to be able to talk about his annual fundraiser. A few people did donate money, I noticed today in the chat room, and all that money will go to the Caldrius Network as well, any of the donations that come in today. And so, yeah, it's true. My son got a fever and ended up in the hospital overnight one time. And that was just so crushing to my wife and I. We couldn't, you just, as a parent, you just have this, you're trying to fight these worst case scenario thoughts that come up in your mind. But when things are getting that bad, when you're actually watching your child waste away in front of you, in front of your very eyes, the way Wendy had to, that is just so heavy that no doubt she has a huge appreciation for the keepers of the plant when it's done so much for her family and for her son. It's incredible. It is heart-wrenching.
Love is incredible. It's so powerful what you guys are doing and showing. The stuff Forrest is doing. Like you said, every plant is every strain, everything is specific to someone else's DNA and all that kind of stuff. Well, man, this plant has been suppressed for the last less than 100 years or so, and for the time before that, this was something that is absolutely like in the Egyptian theories. It's in the tombs. It's everywhere. This plant was made for us. It's a no-brainer. For fuck's sake.
Yeah, like let me share some like information about here in Brazil. Like 5 years ago was so hard to find information. So right now, like more information being shared because most of the population doesn't speak any English, right? So we need to have a translation of the like really big like studies to then people trying to understand like the benefits of that. But right now in Brazil, they are allowing some families to plant that, to like start having use of CBD, THC. My experience, it was with cannabis because I moved to Canada some years ago, like 6 years ago. And like one day, one guy came to me and say, "Oh, you have epilepsy. You shouldn't be drinking. You shouldn't be drinking coffee. You should be using cannabis." And I was like, really, my relationship, because I grew up in Brazil and everything was like, no, it's like, no, cannabis is not good. And all my doctors in Brazil, really good doctors, the best, and they are like all saying, no, cannabis is gonna get you worse. You don't use it. For almost my whole life, I had like this mentality, bad mentality about cannabis. And because of the last years, like more information being translated to Portuguese, so everything is changing really fast here. Even like people like my family, really conservative, like all like friends of my family, when they see the change, they can what they are gonna say, you know, like it's like really like you can see. And people say, "Oh, you use cannabis every day, you could have like some problems with that." And I say, "Man, you don't know like the medicine that I take, like really like strong medicine. When you read like all the like the information about you gets really scary." So people don't really like know what they are talking about when they see the difference between like using like those like really drugs that like really makes you like don't have any memory, like have problems with like cognition. And like they say about cannabis is because they don't have any experience. When you have experience with a really patient, you change everything. You say, no, like how possible this is illegal? This is a medicine really powerful. And one of the problems here is because we have like in Brazil, we have those brickweeds. I don't know if you guys know, like comes from Paraguay. Yeah, this is really bad. This is really bad. I want to show you guys just for you to have an idea.
Oh my God, that's been the most horrific thing I've seen.
Yeah, this is so really bad. And like we need to do medicine of it, and we don't know which strains it is. We don't have any information about it. So we have like the whole population here using cannabis without any information about terpenes profiles, which genetics. But that's what we have here is really strict. If you plant here, you are like really like drug dealer. You can go for 10, 15 years. So like the problem is like mainly here it's like having information about it. So we are doing a really great work. Thank you, Marcus Bubbleman, because we are creating content and translating in Portuguese. to people know how to extract better medicine with Ganja Talks University. This is really important for the whole Latin America, to people understand, oh, this is not cannabis, this is like something totally different. So that's what's happening in Brazil right now. But I think we are changing. Latin America is going further with like informations being shared. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I can see now, Joao, where you're coming from. I didn't really know a lot of that about your history and what was driving you to do this Ganja Talks University course with me. And I have to say, like, I'll have to put you in touch with a bunch of the people on this panel, because there's quite a few people that you could be doing online courses with and translating into Portuguese, which that's what he's done with my series that's coming out soon. They're very professional. They create all these beautiful transcribed cards with photos and images, and they have it all transcribed into Portuguese for Brazil. It's incredible to me that Brazil has brickweed, because Brazil could grow some killer cannabis with that tropical sun. Just a matter of knowing the cultivars that you're growing narrow leaf drug cultivars that are going to flourish and do well in that very close to the equator environment. I hope to make it there one day. Go check out Brazil.
Yeah.
Keep doing the good things. Go ahead, Forrest. How's Silas?
Oh, he's okay. Yeah, sorry about that. He had a seizure and dropped a glass, and all of a sudden we had to deal with that and go back to caregiver real quick. But no, I would just say quickly, I'd be happy to lend any assistance to your efforts down there in Brazil, especially if you want to start focusing in on treating endocannabinoid deficiencies and epilepsy, neurological conditions, Crohn's, and others. There's a lot of help here in this community, so absolutely be happy to lend any help we can give.
A lot of help right in this room.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you very much, everyone. I will reach you guys. I'm pretty sure this is going to be really important for like Brazilian families that are struggling at the moment. Thank you very much. I will get in touch with you guys.
Yeah, a lot of it is just giving people the language. We're introducing new concepts, like you said, and sometimes we can really help the learning curve by arming the activists in your community with the language that they need, helping them not have to start from scratch with their arguments, so that when you do have opportunities, you're making the most out of them, and that's something that we work with all of our volunteers, so that if we get a chance to be in front of a lawmaker, in front of officials, we don't want to waste that chance, right? We want to have the education, the background, the knowledge to make sure that we are showing them that we're not just playing with cannabis, that we understand the concepts well, we understand the risks and harms, how to mitigate them, and help educate them. And when they feel like you can be a supporter and give them the power that they need to speak eloquently about it, you tend to get some more traction. So absolutely anything we can do to help, we're there for you.
Absolutely. And I guess one of the people we haven't heard too much from has been Eric from Pure Pressure. He's been nicely, calmly listening. I'm sure he's been very intrigued by the conversation. Welcome, Eric.
Hey, thanks, everyone. Yeah, this has been really enlightening to me to hear, your stories and, with your children and everything that's going on, especially, Coltyn, hearing your experience. This is something that we hear about a lot on the news, but not necessarily something that I know a lot of people personally in that regard. I haven't had a ton of input so far because I work with Pure Pressure and we make solventless extraction equipment, but I'd be curious to get input from some of the other people on the panel here. And it seemed like Mark touched on this a little bit earlier, but where some of these extraction methods fit into the equation to really come up with the kind of whole plant medicine, because we work with labs across the country and across the world that are doing all kinds of things, not just making rosin or bubble hash, but everything from hydrocarbon, CO2, basically everything. So we're in a pretty good spot where we're connected and we've got our ear to the ground with these extraction labs. But I'd love to hear from everybody else, where you see extraction methods fitting into solving these problems for people that are having these issues. And when you have isolates that are stripped away of the terpenes and some of the other really important cannabinoids, if those aren't providing the medical benefits what future technology and what methods of extraction are going to, provide that entourage effect and really are going to be helping people out considerably. We work with a lot of people that, are big into taking dabs and using it for medicine, but it's hard to do at home to make a well-regulated, dosed medicine. That's really something that people, need to get from a licensed extraction lab, or at least from people that have the equipment to do it. So, I'd love to hear from other people on the panel where you see that going and where you see extraction, solving this medicinal problem for people in the future.
I would mention, just to start it off, to go first. Once again, I think it's going to be that quiver, that every extraction process is going to be required to be present and accessible to people. And from there, it's anyone's guesses what the majority of people with the majority of different ailments will choose as their extraction process. But I know that it can be profound. I'll never forget when Cheryl, Haley Rose's mom, first used the bubble bags, and she just said, wow, like, I think it was almost, I can't remember if it was a year or almost 2 years that Haley didn't have a seizure after she started using bubble hash that she would isolate and then I believe mix back together, or mix some of the cultivars back, some of the head sizes back together, and she was giving her them in capsules. Prior to that, she was using like an oil and some flour, and it was like she was still having a seizure here and there, even though it was a 90% decrease. And it's kind of like Forrest said, if you keep looking, sometimes it's not the cultivar, but it's the way you extract the resin from the cultivar. And so in that particular case, now this is my guess, and I know if Chimera's listening, he might disagree, as he did a little bit in Amsterdam, but I've always felt that there's a particular something different in the profile of the bulbous heads versus the capitate stalks and the sessile stalked heads, the three different types of trichomes, the tall capitate stalked, the medium sessile stalked, and the tiny little glandular trichome head that sits on a single stipe cell on the leaf. It looks like it's just right on the leaf, and it's very microscopic. It's the harder ones to see, and generally they're not the ones that are extracted off in the process of bubble hash. You leave them behind, and it's one of the reasons when you make an oil, whether it's rosin or a solvent extraction, that you're getting a much higher percent return, sometimes upwards of 10% higher, because there's all of these bulbous heads that you're now accessing instead of simply mechanically separating the heads that are easily breaking off of those long stalked bodies. And so for whatever reason, omitting those bulbous heads in Haley's case was very profound. I'm sure adding them in someone else's case will be very profound. And I think it's why no system is going to put any other system out of business, so to speak, or out of being an option. And that goes for everything from the people that want to do gas extractions to CO2 to cryoethanol to rosin pressing to bubble hash making to mechanical screen separation of dry sifting. All of these different methods, to me, are going to stay valid. And it kind of gives you hope in this whole cannabis industry of it not just becoming this bland sort of pharma model of having single molecules available, but that, the idea of craft farmers, well, that's really all of these different extraction processes, all of these different cultivars. And it goes to show you the value of every cultivar, that it's not just going to be one cultivar that's going to be the answer for everyone, but there's probably going to be maybe 1,000+ cultivars that the billions of people in the world are going to want to have access to, maybe tens of thousands for that matter.
I really think solventless is going to be the way to go. I've always chose the high road. We were the first ones to do strain-specific nug runs for all of our products back in the medical days, about 4 years ago up here in Washington. And with the production being so high, there's no reason why we can't produce the highest quality and go. And I really believe that the solventless, it keeps the terpene profiles and really does the job. It's a great product, and that's what we use here on the farm. I mean, basically on our farm, our little medical farm that we have up here right now, we what we don't smoke in joints that year, the following year we make extract bubble hash with, and we love that process. It oxidates a little bit over that period of time, but then it gives the more CBN effect, and we use it for sleeping. And it's I think solventless is definitely the way to go, and in my humble opinion.
I know that's our goal, is to get to solventless extraction. We just have to kind of balance what we have access to in time and volunteers and ease of use. But we would be happy to test out any of those solventless extraction methods and machines and report back to anybody. But I agree 100%. Where efficacy seems to continue to show better percentages of benefit tends to be in how well you can maintain the integrity of what the plant is producing. And the better we can do that, I think the better options we'll have as far as potential success with folks. Because I think even, with cold ethanol, you're washing out water-soluble processes. With other extraction methods, you have huge loss of terpenes and other compounds in the plant. So I couldn't agree with that more, and I look forward to a time where that's a little, where we can get there as an organization. But again, we kind of started driving the car before it was finished being built, just out of necessity. So we kind of work with what we have, and I think it's one of the things we try to teach folks is that, there is an ideal, but there's a lot of benefit that you can do at home that is under ideal. It might not be the ideal processes, but there are distillers that you can have on your countertop that look like Mr. Coffee machines, that some are garbage and some are decent. And as long as you have access to good testing analytical labs, and you can start making some progress on your own. And that's what is beautiful about cannabis, is that it is, despite everyone's best effort, whether it be pharmaceutical companies or other folks, it doesn't allow itself to be restrained and held down and contained. It is for the people. It is here for us to integrate into our communities. It is relatively easy to grow and produce and utilize on your own. And I think that as people get better understanding of that and more comfortable familiarity, they're going to find that they have a lot of control over their health and options, especially as we get the laws to come into place to mitigate the risk involved.
Yeah, I'll add something to that, which is we're seeing a big trend on our end. And, some of the savvier cannabis consumers that have been, growing their own, is really mainly the home growers. They identify the strains that they really enjoy, either for, palliative, medicinal, or purely recreational use. But I think going forward, as home growing and this stigma of cannabis tends to slowly get washed away, I think people are really going to be detailing their own treatments for themselves at home, finding that AC/DC strain, if that's what works for you at home, not only growing it yourself, but processing it at home yourself, using either rosin, bubble hash, those are really the main ways that people are able to do it safely at home without going the route of open blasting. But as home growing really picks up and as this becomes more acceptable, we're really excited to see people tailoring the strains that they find that they're getting the most out of, doing it at home and repeating that process, as opposed to, it seems like in Coltyn, in your case, you guys had to move to Colorado and back. I mean, I think over time, we're going to see people really refining their own self-medicating practices for what they need and what they want, and doing it safely and easily.
Well, I couldn't agree more. For sure, we totally believe here on the farm, and have for years, that the plants are a healing plant, and instinctively they know how to heal you. So that's why every grower says they grow the best weed, because they do grow the best weed for them. So and back in the day when we had patients, we used to bring in an article of their clothes or a picture or something that had their energy in it and put it in the garden. And they seem to think over the years that it really was designed for them and, really healed them. So I'm all about the home grow. We really need to keep the home grow going. There's no reason why the multi-millionaire corporations down the streets can grow hundreds of thousands of plants, but mom and pop can't grow a couple, just like they do their tomatoes, peppers, and onions. So that's how we feel on our farm. I think it's a personal thing, and I think as it moves across the country, we got to insist that home grow is a part of it.
Yeah, and there's such a deep variety of cannabis strains, and I think that you and many other people on this panel could speak much more to that than I could. But if I smoke traditional chocolope, I'm not feeling too good. And there's people where that really is what they want. So I'm very excited to see people being able to dial this in for themselves and grow their own, because it's not a one size fits all solution. We've been pretty much talking about that the entire time, whether what part of the trichome this is coming from, that you're getting the effects, but there's a lot more that needs to be done there. That goes without saying. But hopefully more people start growing at home or talking with their friends. There's a lot to be done there. So hopefully that keeps building a lot of momentum, because it is. I mean, it's called weed for a reason. It's not that hard to grow. Even if it's not the indoor top shelf mega stuff, you can still do a really good job at home and come up with a product that has benefits for yourself.
Yeah, my wife's totally strain specific. She's been using the hazes and amnesia haze for years and years and years, and that's all she ever consumes. And I think the home grow also gives the patient, because we're all patients, the ability to find their strain, and then if they're able to grow it themselves, get the maximum benefit from it.
Yeah, I think that this is why. So we're doing work in California with SB 829 to really protect, and for the first time in the country, establish compassion programs. And really, I look at that as the need to establish and protect the community resources that have developed in California that might be unique to California. I don't know, others can speak. Colorado and Washington, we get a lot of calls for help for families there. But in California, we had 20 years of the ability to just kind of work to integrate cannabis in our communities. And we developed a lot of networks of just small, local, small-time farmers. They develop little patient networks, and they have time to really get to know and work with the people in their communities. And that is something that I think needs to be protected. And I don't see it as a threat to industry either. I mean, I think that there is a place for everything. And there are people who need the over-the-counter sort of products that are provided. And there are always people who need more specialized medicine. And I think that for me, that's why protecting our small farmers is so important, because they play an integral role in that sort of communal networking that cannabis has an opportunity to provide on a local level. And some of the fights. So SB 829 here in California is a bill that will recognize compassion programs. It sets up some of the standards for that. It is looking at developing a new compassion license type in California. Whether that'll be a type 13 license for you Californians who know what that means, or it'll be under the medical guise, we're not sure yet, but it'll be a compassion license. And it also takes the steps to start the proper tax exemptions for charitable donation. So it deals with the cultivation taxes and the excise taxes, so making those all exempt from any of those taxes in those programs. And because of that, we're able to really maintain some of these programs that have been developed over the years and really make sure that we can have the benefit of our small-time farmer and local networks that in California are at big risk. I mean, it's a big topic now of loss for the small farmers, and being able to maintain that community is really important to us. And I think it directly relates with the ability to develop, hone, and provide specialized medicine. And Silas says hello.
Yeah, I'm not happy, Dad.
Okay, buddy.
Cool shirt.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, so we definitely got to fight for the small farmers.
I'm really excited though about this legislation. Those of you who are in California, please familiarize yourself with SB 829. It's going to need your support. We have a big road to go. We have, it deals with taxes, so we need a 2/3 vote in the Senate. We've had to get through a bunch of appropriations and other committees that have been difficult, and we're getting threats from the governor's office to potentially veto the bill because it has exemptions, not necessarily the context of what's important. So we're working on those things, but we're going to need all the support we can get. So if you're in California, please familiarize yourself with SB 829 out of Senator Wiener's office and show us some support, because it really will be groundbreaking as far as what it will give us the ability to do to integrate charitable programs as it pertains to cannabis and how we will interact with the cannabis industry. Really, my goal has always been, if we can make the cannabis industry the hero and help the people who aren't able to be served anyway. It's not that we're taking away clients. A lot of these people are either bedridden, indigent, don't have the funds to do it, or are using medicines like we talked about that are very unique to that one person. So there's not a whole product line developed. These people just aren't able to get services. If we can make the cannabis industry the hero for those communities, I think everybody wins. And I believe that it can be done and make everybody more profitable and successful in the long run if we take the gift that comes along with working with cannabis and make sure we spread it out into those areas of our community that need it. You know, one of the things they say is, we get a lot is, well, how come, you know, the cannabis industry just can't take care of any like rare patients, rare seizure disorders, rare disease, you know? And it's really, to me, it's kind of a silly question, but, you know, we just got to look at it as, you know, how come McDonald's or, you know, the supermarket chains aren't feeding all the homeless and feeding all the hungry, right? You know, some of them have food programs and some of them try to integrate social good, but there's always a need at the local level for Meals on Wheels, right? Or other programs who go right into the homes of the people who are missed and cut out of the system due to the serious needs that they have. And, you know, we can institute that into our cannabis industry. And if we do so, you know, I strongly feel that everybody's going to benefit from that. So SB 829 is really laying the groundwork to establish the proper tax exemptions, the proper recognition of charities, and the ability to integrate it into our industry so that there is no waste, there is no leftovers, there's no need for destruction. Everything is funneled into charitable organizations, and everybody wins.
Oops, I'm muted. Oopsie. I guess we didn't get to say goodbye to Wendy and Coltyn. They were getting ready for the, I believe she said it was the county fair. Yes, dance competition. So I guess her daughter's a big dancer. We'll wish her luck at her competition. And yeah, what a great conversation today. It started as just one of the topics we were going to have, but it kind of held the conversation all day. It's a big one, you know. As always, very enjoyable. Yeah, I don't know. What do you guys say? Got more to say? Oh, there were people donating money for us. I'll send that to you at the Caldrius Network when I figure out what it is. I don't know if it's $70 or $100 or something, but I did see a bunch of money get donated in the chat room. So thanks everyone for that. I'm sure that the group will find something quite good to do with that. I'm sure it'll go a long way.
Yeah, I appreciate that a lot. You know, you guys, last year, I think we did one and people donated money. We were able to buy cases of dropper bottles, all those little things that are needed that add up over time. And so thank you guys very much. And for those of you, if you don't mind, Marcus, we're doing a charity. So we work for, so we're doing a big fundraiser on August 17th that is just about to be announced online. It hasn't yet. We got some killer bands. You know, we're doing dinner and those sort of things. So those of you who are in California, Northern California, if you'd like to attend, reach out to me. We'd love to have you. It's going to be more of a party than a dry fundraiser. We have some killer bands coming from San Francisco. So we're going to get the families down there. We're going to try to raffle some things off, raise some money the old-fashioned way, and just do some good, you know. And the foundation of our ability to save lives in our communities is the cannabis community. The industry, the consumers, the culture in the community we've stood on their shoulders, and then I get a lot of pats on the back saying, "Hey, Forrest, good job." But I'm just facilitating it. It's the community that is doing this, and they deserve all the credit. So anybody in the area, come out and say hi. Then we'll be announcing on our Instagram and things like that here pretty soon. But I cannot thank you guys enough.
Are you doing a silent auction?
Yeah, we're looking for items. So, you know, with raffle tickets and items, it's, you know, we just need money that can bring in dollars so that people can donate. So if you own a business, anybody owns a business or has things they want to donate, you know, other nonprofits, they have the ability to get tax exemptions, right? We deal with cannabis. We're not allowed to offer the tax exemption. So we have all, you know, I often say it's like all the altruism, all the heart, and none of the benefits, you know. So it's very difficult. We can't get cars donated because they're not able to write them off. So we really lean even more heavily on just someone saying, hey, I'm not going to get a write-off for this, but, you know, this is a cause that we need to support. And, you know, those days are coming. We'll be able to act like a charity and a nonprofit. But for now, we got to scrimp and scrap and fight for every nickel that we have so we can open the door to more families. So,
well, I'll donate some products to be raffled off, and I'm sure I could hit up my social media. People are offering me shit all the time to shout out their companies and whatnot on my account, and it's like I'll put it all on them that maybe they should make a donation to, you know, not necessarily a shout out, but to just something that's actually really good.
Yeah, that would be great. Hey, I'll shout out anyone who needs one. Of course, I don't have the audience you do, but, you know, if you're doing good work, you deserve to be told that you're doing good work. So, yeah, every cent goes back into the project, because again, we're all volunteers. It's not like it's my salary that gets a cut first. This is a volunteer organization, so you know that it's going where it needs to go. So Appreciate it, man. Thanks. And any plugs would be great.
Well, Lois Lane just kicked down 50 large.
Holy cow.
Yeah. I'm not sure if that's sterling or if that's euro. I think it's euro. Pretty cool. Yeah, I guess maybe another 20 minutes rocking on this Hash Church. We could go till noon possibly, if there's anything in any particular specific things you guys want to hit and talk about. I've been super stoked on the Vape Exhale today. I haven't pulled it out in a while in honor of Sabo coming in, which he had to split and never made it back. But I can't believe the profile and the taste on how good it is with this unit. It is totally, it's convection conduction, basically. The difference between putting something right on a pan that's very hot and vaporizing your material versus putting your material into a quartz rod, which then goes into a glass tube, which has been heated from the outside. So it's kind of like the glass tube heats up the air inside, which then heats up the quartz. And there's a preservation that's going on. I'm wondering the importance. I know I'm coming at this just from a strictly, personal enjoyment place, not necessarily, it makes my back pain stop hurting or whatnot, but just the pure enjoyment of the flavor. And I'm wondering how much that will also play a part in the future of developing methods of, receiving these cannabinoids through specific materials that retain heat differently and therefore preserve the profile of the terpenes differently, because you just get a more accurate, in my opinion, it's my opinion, obviously, you get a more exact, I don't even know how to say it. The flavor profile is just so much more on point when it's preserved. There's just this more enjoyment that's had from it compared to blowing something up. And, in my opinion, one of the worst experiences taking a really hot dab, like at 800 or 900 plus degrees, just blasting it off of the quartz or the titanium, and it just burning someone's throat. It's really like the worst way to turn someone on to cannabinoids, in my opinion, giving them that kind of hot dab and looking for that negative association with taking a dab versus offering someone the tastiest, most preserved dab at the proper temperature in a normal amount. That to me is an important part of cannabis normalization, not killing the people that you're trying to turn on.
Yeah, I have a Vape Exhale from way back in the day. It's funny because I saw Sabo coming on and said, I haven't talked to this guy in 3 years, but we had one of their original models when I was working at Massroots a long time ago, and it ended up in my hands after things kind of went belly up. And, I do not work for Vape Exhale. I have no affiliation with them. I don't get anything for saying this, but, it is a great product. When I dab at home, that's definitely the one that I use. And I would agree with Bubble Man that, there's a lot of ways to skin a cat on this, and a hot dab will make somebody never take a dab again in their life potentially. But I'm a fan of the vape exhale as well. They're pretty spendy, but if you're dabbing semi regularly, they're super nice.
Yep. I'm packing mine right now.
How about a bong rip? How about a nice big old bong rip?
Yes, D420K. I agree. A bong rip is in order.
I got a chance to try, some of the live rosin extracts and that Bubble Man and whatever, I don't remember what it was called, Marcus, the vape pen that I think you and Tony worked on together.
Gary.
Gary, right.
Yeah, Gary developed it.
It was that thing was incredible. I don't smoke a lot of cannabis because I can't deal with the THC. Just I got too much to do, right? But you start introducing the terpene levels of that, the cleanliness of it, and it was, I don't know how anyone could ever go back to a lower quality product at that point. It wasn't just that it tasted great, but when it was able to maintain such high terpene levels and other things, the effect of it was completely different, and it was all of the good. It mitigated all of the negatives that are traditionally associated with too much THC, and I missed that thing.
We'll have to get you another one.
It was great.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, there's something to be said for the enjoyment of it, strictly for the enjoyment, because that's one of the main reasons so many people kept the plant for so many years. Before a lot of us knew the actual depth of the medicinal values of cannabis. We always kind of knew it, but then, I'll never forget being like, oh, well, it's not gonna shrink your cancer out of existence, but you could definitely maintain a higher quality of life by dealing with the nausea from the chemo and the radiation. Fast forward 10 years, Cristina Sanchez at the University of Madrid, actually THC does cause apoptosis in cancerous cells. And, the mind was blown, and it just keeps getting more and more blown as we learn about this important system, the endocannabinoid system that seems to regulate all biological functions, and being done through, taking in, whether consuming, inhaling, vaporizing cannabinoids is pretty incredible. It gets to the point where, and I didn't say it earlier, I didn't want to take things into too esoteric of an area, but I just feel like a big part of why this hasn't moved as fast forward as it may have is because the amount of politicians you have to go through to get to that top layer, where literally maybe those top 3 and 4 layers are housed almost exclusively by borderline sociopaths, if not complete sociopaths, people that don't feel empathy, people that don't have compassion, people that can just watch your child seize right in front of you and then go in and sign the bill that says, no, we're going to keep this stuff out of existence. It seems like there's enough caring politicians that are in the bottom levels, and this is just maybe my own crazy opinion, that you can kind of get through, but as you get higher and higher, they're just seemingly like sociopaths, that it wouldn't just be instantaneous. Like, what else could be clogging it up and slowing it down except someone that has no ability to feel empathy or compassion or to feel someone's pain? What else could it be?
Yeah, that's a great question. With these we just had our Senate walking into it, we were told that the Republicans were voting no or abstaining just on party line. And that's where it's at. That's why the 2/3 vote is going to be so hard in the States right now. Getting a 2/3 vote on anything that's just not 51 or 49 is almost impossible with how toxic some of the politics are here right now. And we had, I started a group working with some other organizations, and we had, so we had vets organizations there. We had WHAM, Women and Men's Alliance for Medical Marijuana. It's the oldest in California there. So we had all these different demographics, and we had the Republicans who showed up. So 6 out of 10 of the senators showed up. The 2 Republicans that showed up went from no votes and flipped and voted yes. They didn't even abstain, which was going to be their neutral. And I thought that was really a good sign that on this level, at least, we're still seeing some of that benefit. But the other committees, that wasn't the case. And all of them that didn't show up just voted no. Like they just, they don't even read it and vote no. And it's really, I have a hard time wrapping my brain around it, where how you can be in any position of control and see the scientific mountain of evidence, the people coming in, young, old, and otherwise, saying this is benefiting our life, and it's almost impossible to really give credible demonstrations of harm, of how it's harming anybody, and just have people really not give any thought to it at all and just tell them sorry, but we're not going to allow it. It's mind-boggling to me. I don't understand it at all.
Well, that's what I'm saying. There doesn't seem to be many options other than the fact that potential sociopaths are at the top. Like how else could a plant like this be kept illegal for so long? And not only kept illegal, but to such a serious level that kicking doors down, taking children away from families, putting people in jail for, well, look at Rick DeLisi's father in jail for 98 years. I think he served 31 plus years now. Like, that is insane to do that. There's got to be some reason. You have to be so worried about the way this plant affects people, the way this plant gives access to healing, the way this plant changes the way people think versus the way maybe potentially they want you to think. It definitely, I've questioned it for a very long time. I've just always tried to understand, like, there's something more going on that's not being discussed. And it goes deep, and it's borderline frightening, and you almost don't want to face it. But there's something else going on when they can just allow so much suffering. And we all know that they've had patents on this since the 70s, that they understand the profound healing nature of cannabinoids, whether they may allow us to realize or not. They definitely, come on, they do. They understand it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So playing ignorant makes it even more scary, where it's like, whoa.
Propaganda works. That's the bottom line. You can convince whole communities of people that reality around them is something other than what it really is. And, I've met so many people who just know that cannabis is dangerous. It's written into their worldview and their paradigm. And it's hard, this is where we get into kind of psychology a little bit, right? But this pertains to a whole bunch of other subjects. We see the world for what it is. There are subconscious mechanisms that want to protect that worldview, right? That the influencing of that paradigm is seen as a risk, and they want to protect that worldview. They want to fit into the community that they're in, who shares that worldview, whether it's real or not real, fantasy or reality. And that's kind of what we're up against. Is people. Some of it is they're just cold and callous and they don't have time or the interest to learn about it. But the others, they just want to be able to keep control in their communities, or they believe to their core that what they think is real without ever taking the time to self-evaluate. Why do I believe what I believe? And this obviously is part of the human condition, and we should do that on all subjects, not just cannabis. But the real problem is people feel that they have facts and belief systems that are based in fact that have been really based out of propaganda and disinformation for decades. And that's going to take some time to change, because people, consciously or not, they resist against that. They don't want that worldview changed. And that's why trauma is such a great educator. That's why seeing people suffering, seeing seizures, seeing adults with wasting syndrome, it's traumatic when you see it. It influences your brain differently, and it allows for paradigm shifts because the brain associates and starts to see the risk. And when you're able to see the risk, your brain responds differently than if you just have to imagine what that's like. And that's why it's such a useful tool. And that's why, families like Coltyn and others who are able to put, and adults who are able to put their suffering out there, as embarrassing as that is, have such a dramatic impact, because people are able to change their thought process in different ways than if they're just trying to have to imagine that someone says this is good.
That's a really good way of putting it, Forrest, in the way you're talking about the paradigm shift of your thought patterns and the way you see and process information when watching someone go through those things. It definitely is something that could kickstart just opening up the way you think about things rather than just believing them.
Yeah, the human brain is wired to learn from kind of fear and trauma, right? It's that evolved need to protect itself, you know. It's why, you know, it's easier to, you know, spank your kids than to teach them over time lessons to have them ingrained, because they'll learn quickly through fear, because the brain is designed to not put yourself in a situation where harm can come again. It takes a lot longer to integrate new thought processes and make them a part of one's being through other methods, because we didn't evolve that way. And, you know, that's a whole nother conversation, but it does, you know, it does help to really understand why this is going to be a long process, right? We can't go in there and traumatize people every day to get them to really kind of snap out of that paradigm and see it. And it's going to take continued interaction, continued experiences in their life. That's why everybody who is having, you know, benefit in their community, sharing that with your community. And if they write you off the first time, realize that has nothing to do necessarily with you. I mean, it might if you're not good at communicating your message, but, you know, a lot of times that's what happens the first time. You're bumping into that protection of their worldview, and you just it takes more interaction, and it takes getting out there more often and building those relationships. And that's what some of the most amazing things I've seen happen through a lot of this cannabis activism in the last 10 years is because we've had some laws change, and we've been able to get into the community more and more. And it's been really exciting to see some of those shifts happening in communities. And, you know, I'm really excited to see where we're going to be in 10 years. I mean, I think this conversation is going to look completely different, not only what the industry looks like, but what our communities look like and how it's been integrated, you know.
Well, look at Billy Caldwell in the UK. I mean, he had his medicine taken at the border. They were like, no, we're keeping this medicine. And in a very short period of time, they were like, they wrote something up that allowed him to get that medicine. And it was, it's not something I thought I'd see the UK do anytime soon. They seem to be so staunch and strict when it comes to medical cannabis, while, you know, GW Pharmaceuticals exporting tons annually from the country. It's pretty wild to see that it's slowly but surely it's starting to happen even in the most hardened of places. I mean, Wendy mentioned Oklahoma. Oklahoma gave Will Foster 96 years, like less than, what was that, 15 or 20 years ago maximum? And now they're implementing a medical bill. So that's pretty huge. When it happens in places like Texas and Oklahoma and the UK, you can definitely feel that you've been making headway. And then you're in California, Forrest, so that's like kind of like the sort of epicenter of the cannabis world, where so much of that inspiration came out of cannabis. Once again, the exporting of the culture, right? It's definitely.
It is, you know, but I try to, people who don't live here or work with like rare patient groups, you know, we're not out of the woods. I mean, here in California, it's actually harder now than it's been in the last 20 years to continue to treat ourselves and the families that we work with. We don't really have those commercial activities, and we've now made it inherently illegal, and people will lose their license and their livelihood if they interact with people outside of that network. Well, that's us. So all the good people who are working with us are like, hey, sorry, we'd love to donate this, we'd love to do these extractions, but we're not allowed to. So, you know, there's just a lot of again, we've kind of taken cannabis, we've locked it in a basement for, you know, 70 years or whatnot, and now we're trying to just let it out of the basement and say, okay, now we're going to make that legal, as if that's what cannabis in the community and the industry would have looked like without prohibition, you know. And I think where the fight is not allowing prohibition and what it did to cannabis to define what it's going to look like outside in the real world. I think there are ways that we don't even understand that cannabis would have been integrated into our communities, into our households, if prohibition had never happened. And one of the things that I want to continue to do is not say what will they allow us to do, but help craft and form the future of what do we want cannabis integration to look like in our society, and just fight for it. And I think it's very different than just only having shops with glass countertops. There is a lot bigger future out there if we look at the big picture of the good that we can do, the type of businesses we can create, if we just kind of step out of that paradigm, right, of this is what cannabis is, and look at all the different ways we can integrate it into our society and say, what do we want it to be? And that's some of the fight that we have going on here in California, and it's great to see Oklahoma, even Texas, like you said, is moving forward. But I want them to know that if they understand that just that legalizing specific commercial activity is by no means the end of the road, they can start to really craft that from day one and start to fight those fights now, because we're learning some of them the hard way. It's taken us a long time to get here, and it's unfortunate that after 20 years, patient groups and charitable groups and those sort of things are in a worse position than they've been in ever here in California. So we're going to make sure that changes. Again, SB 829 for those of you around here. But yeah, with programs like this and continuing to fight all the good people here on the panel, we're gonna see cannabis thrive in all sorts of different ways. It's not one flower; it's a garden, and it's really exciting to see all these different aspects of cannabis now come into the conversation. It's such a diverse plant with diverse applications that we're gonna have a lot to talk about for a long time to come.
Well said, Forrest. And right on 12 p.m. instantly, 0000. That was like perfect timing on my clock. 12:00:00. I think I would love to thank everyone for coming on today. It was quite enjoyable. If maybe you guys want to share, if you want to start with Joao, you can share your websites for the course, and then we'll go through. I'll mention the next group of people, and you can all sort of share how we can get in touch with you. And Forrest can share. Fine, we'll leave Forrest till the end. He can share the information for the fundraiser. Go ahead, Joao.
Awesome. Thank you very much for the possibility here to share my story about cannabis, how I'm related to that. And thank you again for the course that you're sharing with Brazil. And as well, who would like to check that is solventless extractioncourse.com. So we are gonna still have 3 more days of application. We close on Monday. 2 more days, sorry. We close our subscriptions on Monday. Really nice course. Thank you very much. You guys can reach me on Ganja Talks Instagram. My Instagram is Ganja Talks. So if you guys can reach me there, it's going to be easier. We develop more conversation through email and everything, as well as Who is Happy, which is an app for cannabis consumers. Is kind of Cannabis Foursquare, which I'm one of the founders as well. We are being accelerated by Canopy Boulder last year. So I have 2 relationships with cannabis, which is medicinal, and as well as my work. I'm really in love with cannabis for so long. So thank you very much. I would appreciate if you guys have some knowledge to share with Brazil. This is really important for us at the moment. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Good on, Joe. Sarah, do you want to share the Karma Cup Instagrams and information where people can get more contacts?
Yes. Sorry. Always forget the unmute. Okay. So yes, thank you. I know I'm sitting here high and just listening. Okay. Yeah. So it's pretty much on every medium. It's the Karma Cup, or online it's thekarmacup.com. And I invite everybody to come out to the event this year, September 8th and 9th in Toronto for the festival. The location to be announced the day before. So we have a text thing. If you text karma to 393939. You'll get a text message with the location the day before when we release it. If you want to enter, July 27th, go to my website, thekarmacup.com. There's all sorts of ways you can enter and get involved. And if you want a booth or something, if you want to be with Bubble Man, have a booth next to him, you know, come and hit me up on one of the mediums, you know. Sarah at thekarmacup.com if you want to send me an email. And thank you, Mark. I appreciate you having me on your panel. Most of it is sort of a little bit above my head as just like a humble grower and extraction type person. So, but I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Awesome, Sarah. Did you want to let everyone know how they can get in touch with you, Wade?
Thank you, Mark. Yeah. Probably the easiest way to reach me is Wade at houseofharlequin.org. I have an Instagram thing, but I'm still learning how it works. So I'm not very adept in the internet world. And yeah, you can find links to that at caldriusnetwork.org as well. I really can't overemphasize how, to me, one of the things that's really beautiful about Forrest and the work that he's doing with the Caldrius Network is it's really capturing the essence of what is the intention about your work with cannabis. And at one extreme is compassionate use and need, and at another extreme, and neither is good or bad or right or wrong, it's just an observation, is the opportunity to support yourself and your family and your life. And so one of the ways that dichotomy, I think, can be brought together is, well, I'm stoned as well, so I'm going to stop there. Intention is really, I think, an essential part of working with cannabis. And both over-the-counter versions of cannabis as medicine and pharmaceutical prescription grade, not from a drugstore, but from someone you know or someone in your own family. There's medical benefit with the plant. It's the real miracle here is the plant itself. And thank you, Marcus, and all of you who sit in on this event that happens, for bringing yourself and your expertise and your heart to what we're talking about here. Because the plant is the miracle, but we are bringing it out of that basement of prohibition into the light, the true nature of how it is as a plant and as a healing part of our lives. So that's the end of my stoned rap for today. Thank you, Marcus, for Hash Church. It's such a beautiful thing. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely, Wade, and thanks for sharing. It always puts a smile on my face. Love your authenticity. Farmer Tom, did you want to share with us how we can get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can find me at Farmer Tom on Facebook, Farmer Tom on Instagram, and I think Farmer Tom Organics on Twitter. I'm just getting that thing up and running. You can also find me at Farmer Tom Organics, and the 28th of this month, we're having a Frisbee golf event here in outside the Portland, Oregon area. So you can go to my webpage, farmertomorganics.com, and find out the information there. So again, super honored and stoked to be, honored to be on the show and to be with all these amazing minds and to be able to contribute. So thanks again, Marcus, for having me, brother. And I look forward to seeing you on the road. I'm going to be at traveling a lot this year. I'll be at Seattle Hemp Fest speaking. I'm going to Oklahoma to speak at their Hemp Fest. Then I'll be in Madrid for Spannabis, and then Barcelona again next year for Spannabis. And hopefully we'll see you again there, Marcus. Thanks a lot.
You will absolutely see me at Spannabis in Barcelona. And I believe Alex Rogers is throwing a ICBC, an International Cannabis Business Conference, the day before in conjunction with the Spannabis guys. I believe. So I'm sure he'll announce it when it's...
Perfect. I want to give a shout out to my friends at Greenardo's over there in Barcelona. They've got a really good shop. Go and visit them. Thanks a lot, you guys.
Awesome, dude. How about you, Eric? Unmute
myself here. Yeah. Thanks for having me on. It's always great to be a part of Hash Church. You know, if anybody is ever interested in learning more about solventless extraction, rosin, anything like that, that's really our specialty and what our company focuses on. Pure Pressure. You can find us at purepressure.com. That's P-U-R-E, not peer, P-E-R. That'd be a little messed up. So we're purepressure.com. Go Pure Pressure on Instagram. A lot of great content. And we always like talking to people. So if you've got questions about solventless, you want to learn more, you're trying to get into it, reach out to us and we'd be happy to help you. So yeah, thanks again for having us, Mark. Really appreciate it. It's been really enlightening to hear what everyone here has to say and what everyone's doing.
Absolutely, dude. Thanks for coming out and sharing the conversation with us. How about you, D420K? Where can they find you?
D420K on all the social media. Just look her up. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Yeah, there's a lot of other ones. There's some other ones I've signed up as D420K on.
Well, that's easy to find. Thanks for coming in, dude. You want to yell it one more time?
Bong rip, mother lovers. One more before we go.
One more before we go. And then Dr. Mark Scialdone. How about you? How do we find you online? I know I'm connected to you, but how does everyone else find you?
Let's see. How can you find me online? I don't know. Just search. I guess on my Facebook. But certainly you can reach out to Marcus and Marcus could hook you up with me. Or I'm currently director of science at Culta. There you go. You could look at Culta's CULTA. We got a Facebook page and a Instagram page, and we're having a party in our grand opening at our dispensary next Saturday in downtown Baltimore, 215 on the Key Highway, which is like really close to like the Inner Harbor and a nice part of downtown Baltimore. So if you happen to be in the area, do stop in. I think they're going to have bands and a food truck and all kinds of other stuff. And yeah, so it's really cool. I got a couple other projects going on all throughout the country, but you could certainly find our work there. Shout out to my crew there, Michelle and Lacey, doing a great job, and Chase over at the dispensary. And yeah, we've been making great live resin and shatters, and we're going to be introducing just in time for 710 our vape pens, right? Right. Everything's based on trying to do it for 710.
Those are the DMT vape pens you've been working on?
No, not yet. But hey, I'd love to work on that. I've heard they exist.
They exist.
I know. No, these are going to be cannabis vape pens. No DMT vape.
These crazy kids these days, I'll tell you.
Not yet, but soon. Those will be on. That's next generation of product.
Awesome, dude. Well, that's great. Thank you for coming on, dude. For me,
yeah, thanks for having me, Marcus.
Always. I'm Bubbleman, BC Bubbleman on Instagram, and Bubbleman Brand as well on Instagram, and of course Bubbleman's World, the channel you're watching right now on YouTube. And we'll finish it off with Forrest. You can tell us about how we can get in touch with him and how you guys can help support them, either donating products from companies that you know of or that you personally own, to straight up donations as well. Shoot, Forrest.
Yeah, hey, thanks everybody. It's always good to be here. Really happy to see everybody again. I'm just glad Hash Church is up and running. So yeah, the Caldrius Network, you can reach us at the caldriusnetwork.org. It's a weird word, I know, CALADRIUS. And it's the same on Instagram at Caldrius Network. I'm at Forrest_Hurd, HURD. And, you can reach out there. I'm not on social media a whole bunch because we're busy, but definitely been keeping it up more with all the need to organize with political action if you're here in California. And yeah, donations can go in through the website, or you can email myself at Forrest with 2 R's, FORREST at caldriusnetwork.org. But you know what? I would just say that the Caldrius Network is one of many grassroots organizations that are trying to do good in their community. I know that ATN and the veterans organizations are working hard. I know that there's organizations that are working with adult cancer patients, AIDS wasting patients. I would just encourage everybody, hey, you want to help the Caldrius Network? We need it, and we would be grateful. But there are likely people in your own community that are just as desperate and just as good of a cause. And I would just encourage everybody out there to just take a time and look at what's around and get involved with them, because not only is it a good cause, but it can add a level of fulfillment to your work with cannabis that could really be a game changer in your own daily life. It's amazing what working for others who have it worse than you do can do to yourself and your meaning in life. So reach out to us or find someone in your community that needs it. Can't thank you guys enough. And if you're in California, remember SB 829, one of, in my opinion, the most critical roles for just doing what is right as it pertains to cannabis in our communities. One of the most critical bills that's up. And if we get it passed in California, it's a domino that could tip to the rest of the country. So please, all of your support would be welcomed. And thanks again, everybody, for having me on.
Awesome, everybody. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone who's watching. We still have over 400, almost 420 people watching live. I think we closed in on around 600 today. So that's good numbers. Thanks, everyone. As always, let's try to meet up again next Sunday. Peace out, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.